Good evening. This is the June 7th, 2018 meeting of the Monroe Planning and Zoning Commission. Meeting's being held in Town Council Chambers. It's now 7:01 p.m. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And will the commission please introduce themselves, starting on my right?
Brian Condon, alternate.
Kenneth E. Wilk, alternate.
Jonathan Formicella, alternate.
Diane Ambrosi, Commissioner.
William Porter, Chairman.
Paul Lisi, Secretary.
Michael Riley, Vice Chairman.
Will Agresta, Planner.
Scott Schatz, I am Land Use Group Director and Town Engineer.
Rebecca Wood, Recording Secretary.
All right, item number 3, organizational and administrative matters. Anything, Will?
No.
Item number 4, general public participation. Is there anyone who would like to address the commission on an issue that's not related to a public hearing? Seeing none, we'll move on. General appointments, we have none. Public hearings. We have 2 public hearings tonight. They are both reconvened from earlier meetings, so I'm not going to reread the notice. First up is item number 6, SEP 2018-01, file number 1596A, 485 Pepper Street, Industrial District 1. Special exception permit application proposing a change of use to allow the storage of building materials and construction equipment. Doris R. Urban, Robert A. Cummings, Norma P. Davis, Glenn N. Davis, and Deborah Danasco, property owners. Joseph Grasso, applicant. This is reconvened from 5/17/18. Will, any new?
No new exhibits.
No new exhibits. Okay. For the applicant.
Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Kevin Soley. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut with Soley Engineering. Apologize I wasn't able to be with you at our last meeting. While we did go to the hospital, my wife didn't give birth on Thursday. It wasn't until Sunday. We went down, they sent us home, and the meeting was over, unfortunately. But I did listen to the tape, and I spoke with my colleagues who presented at the hearing. I believe I'm up to speed with the collective discussions between our previous presentation and also the commission's, and I really got to hear the commission's concerns. I guess my biggest question is, I know at the last hearing there was a lot of questions regarding some of the interpretations that the applicants presented in terms of the zoning, and I was really hoping that we were going to have an opinion from council, but it sounds as if that wasn't provided based on no additional information for the record.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be part of the record.
Oh, I get,
I'm not
okay.
going to step on your toes.
No, you go ahead.
I mean,
Feel free.
I was able to verbally speak with the town attorney, and I briefed the chairman. I haven't given that ability to brief the whole commission, obviously. So he did get back to me verbally with his opinion on certain subjects. But no, I don't have a written for the exhibit list.
Okay.
Again, it wouldn't necessarily be exhibit because it could be privileged depending on how they treat it. But
Okay.
do you want to get into that now, or do you want me to summarize that, or do you want to do that later, or what do you want?
Yeah, before we go any further, though, Bruno Maini is not with us this evening. He was here for the last
Yes, he was here.
hearing, so we need to seat someone in his place.
Ryan was here, and Ryan is next in line.
Ryan, you're seated?
All right.
Hi. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Will, if you would please summarize for the commission and for the applicant what the town attorney had to say.
Okay. So there were several issues that were discussed with the town attorney based on the last meeting, which, were somewhat outlined in my memo dated, updated May 11th, 2018. I'm not sure if I covered all with him in the call we had with the main ones that we did cover tonight. The first issue was the issue of the existing single-family use versus the change of use to an industrial use, And what does that do, if anything, to the status of the existing single-family use? Because at the last meeting, I believe Robin Pearson was saying that you were not abandoning that, and therefore it could go back to that. And my position in my memo was that indeed you're asking for a change of use. You're replacing an existing use for an industrial permitted use, conforming use potentially if you get a permit. And that would be the abandonment of the existing single-family residence, to which he wholeheartedly agreed.
Okay.
The second issue, and he had other reasons, but I mean, in the summary, that's basically what it was. The second issue was the notion of the principal use that's being proposed, being the storage of building materials or construction equipment. That's the listed permitted use, and this notion of inside versus outside. And based on the construction of the code, he said, based on my examples that I was giving, is that there was specific instances where the commission, in adopting the regulations, for instance, outdoor recreation, outdoor storage of growing nursery products, outdoor storage, was making a conscious and understandable framework of saying those things are outdoors. Where it doesn't say outdoors, that's to be interpreted to be indoors, because they're making a distinction, and they, presumably, he said, you knew what you were doing when you adopted the regulations. So his opinion was that your principal use that is permitted, which is the building materials or the storage of building materials and construction equipment, is an indoor activity, and that the extent that you can do outside falls to the accessory uses, which is the accessory outdoor storage, 20% of the principal building. So first it's indoors, and then you get 20% outdoors. So that's the way he was saying. The third issue was the application of the regulations, and he said the regulations are what they are. The commission is bound by the regulations just as anyone is bound by them, and if there's a requirement, you must follow that requirement. If there's flexibility or some discretionary determination within there, obviously you also have that ability. So, for instance, if something says it has to be 20 feet, well, it has to be 20 feet. If something says it has to be 20 feet except if you provide X, Y, Z, then the commission can reduce that. Well, then you can reduce it based on some kind of discretionary analysis. So again, that's just normal course of consistency and whatnot. So those were the three main tenets that I believe. Did I miss anything? No.
I believe the fundamental component had to do with the sunsetting provision. That.
Oh, yeah, he didn't, unfortunately, didn't give me any input on that.
Okay. Well, I think from a, typically, you know, in situations like this, we would typically request to see a formal opinion in writing, so it can be established on the record for the commission, and then typically our legal counsel would have an opportunity to possibly discuss that with town council. I know that we didn't have a chance for that to happen here.
He has a different point of view on that. He says that if you want to make a legal argument, you should do that, and he'll look at it.
Which I believe we did on the record.
No, he wants to see them in writing. He wants to understand your cases and analysis, and if you are contrary to what's being said.
Do you, town attorney, actually listen to the record so he could actually understand what legal arguments were made by our land use council?
I have no idea. I mean, I sat with him and gave him a summary of what the issues were.
Your summary.
Whether he went and did something different that I don't know of, I don't know. I don't know what he did. That's up to him. And I don't know if that's, I get the pertinence of that. I'm not sure it's a relevant question for me.
Well, I would certainly, I would think that it is, because obviously our land use council provided testimony and gave assertions, and her interpretation of the regulations as a land use attorney who's practiced in the state of Connecticut for 30+ years. So I would hope that his opinion would be based on her testimony, and not simply on.
Well, that's not what I said, but yeah, I don't disagree with that. That isn't what I said. It's
Okay.
not for me to tell him what to do.
No, I understand that. I'm just hoping, or I would have hoped, that his positions would have been based on an understanding of the representations provided by our council. And regarding his three components that you guys discussed, the change of use, the single-family residential being an abandoned use, I understand that, and I don't think our applicant has an issue with that.
Your attorney did.
Well, our attorney...
She was quite emphatic that
She
you were
was?
not abandoning the residential component.
She was, she did, and yes, she was quite emphatic that unless we specifically request the abandonment, then we don't believe that it is abandoned. If the town attorney has a different of opinion, that opinion doesn't necessarily impact our application. Our applicant isn't looking to ever use this as a single-family existing non-conforming use. So if the commission deems that approving this change of use would abandon the single-family use that exists on the property, I don't believe that to be an issue as it pertains to this application. The other component, or the second item that he talked about, having to do with his position regarding that the use has to be indoors, again, I believe our council and I wholeheartedly disagree with that for the same reasons that he was using to justify that. There are specific things in the regulation that says indoors versus outdoors. This isn't the use proposed, the storage of building materials and construction equipment. I know this commission has permitted the parking of vehicles to be outside and not require that all those vehicles be required to be indoors.
That's not what he was saying, and that's not what I was saying in my memo. You can park vehicles outside in connection with the principal use that is permitted and given a permit. The basis here is for you to ask for a principal use permit.
Which
right?
is for the...
Which is for the storage of those materials. And the tenets of the language is there's been distinction of principal uses of being outside. There are some other ones that do say indoor as well, but that's in relation to the opposite where they say the exact same thing, indoor recreation, outdoor recreation, making a distinction that this use is indoor, this one is outdoors, and they're allowed in different districts. In some districts, they're both permitted in the same district. But for the most part, the districts, and especially this district, has some uses that are specifically called out as outside. So again, his opinion was the commission at the time of adopting the regulations presumably knew what they were doing, and they said that these are outside and saying the others aren't by virtue of that framework. And then the outside storage is also a permitted accessory use, so building on that, you now have the ability to have outdoor storage. Because an outdoor use that's outdoors isn't going to have the need for accessory outdoor storage because it's all outdoors.
Again, the regulations are clear in terms of what they say and whether they say indoors or outdoors. And there's no, and I think, and as we provided and is testified and our council provided and testified, we don't believe that the parking of vehicles outside under this proposed use, which is a special exception use in the zone,
No, but the
would be
parking
required
of the
to be done
vehicles as
inside.
being the only activity, that is not the principal use. The principal use is the storage of the materials and the equipment, and it first must be indoors. So the fallback is you use the building as your storage, and then you have 20% outside storage. And then you can park the vehicles for the premises.
Well, I
for the
understand.
premises outside.
I understand. I just disagree, or respectfully
I
disagree. We
understand.
respectfully
I
disagree
understand.
with that.
But
It's
Will
really-
is telling you what our legal counsel has advised us.
Well, I think again, I would be interested to know if your legal counsel offered those opinions based on listening to the record and testimony provided by our land use counsel, or if it was only based on Will's discussion.
His opinion on inside versus outside is based on reading our regulations.
And
That's has no bearing on your attorney's presentation.
well, but I
He's reading-
believe it does because
Well, he's reading our regulations and giving us an interpretation of our regulations based on what's in the book.
and we did the same.
Quite frankly, your attorney only offers
Well,
an
if you
opinion
have
on
something
statute.
that in writing that you can present to the,
We
the
have. We
commission.
provided it in our response to comments, that the regulations are specific when they say indoors or outdoors. And the special exception use that we proposed this application under does not explicitly say it has to be done inside of a building. And furthermore, the concept of requiring vehicles to be parked indoors, I
We
think
don't
is,
require vehicles to be parked indoors.
thank you.
But when you're doing storage, it's
As
not
an
the
ex-
same thing as parking a vehicle.
But not as a primary function, it's as an accessory use on the property. So what is your primary function? on
Our
the
primary
property?
function is the storage of building materials and construction equipment. Construction equipment are vehicles. Vehicles are typically parked outdoors, as is reinforced in your regulations throughout the entirety. I think we just, again, we just have a difference of interpretation and I obviously respect the commission and staff and the council. However, we have a different of interpretation. So if the commission feels strongly in that position, we can certainly discuss that, or you guys can act however you so choose. The last component, having to comply with the regs, we wholeheartedly agree, and we can kind of talk through some of the other items that were discussed at the last hearing. So based on my listening of the record and the discussions held, again, just to orient everybody, the site's located at 485 Pepper Street, which is along the northern leg of Pepper Street. The existing property is improved with a legal non-conforming residence, which we've acknowledged we are not looking to use it as a residence. We are simply looking to propose to park vehicles on the property in accordance with the special exception application we provided. We were doing this in a way because there is a current application pending with the Inland Wetlands Commission, and it will be forthcoming to the Planning and Zoning Commission for the full ultimate operation of the property, and we're simply looking for an opportunity to change the use. Because, as was discussed at the last hearing, there are contractual and legal lending obligations that in order for our applicant to purchase the property, invest in the community, and move forward with his full application, he needs to have a use permit to use the property. The current regulations has it for, or the current property has a existing non-conforming residential use. He doesn't want to use it for an existing non-conforming residential use, and frankly, changing the use to anything requires an approval by this body. So when we initially made this application, we chose this because the regulations don't specifically require that storage and storage of building materials and construction equipment. It doesn't explicitly say that that has to be indoors. We understand the opinions, we've talked about that, we can talk about that further. However, in order to do anything on the property, we need an approval from this commission. And we felt that an application that would be the least intensive, that could be conditioned in a way so it protects the commission and the town, would be the application that is to satisfy, again, lender requirements, contractual requirements with the seller. So we've established that on the record, we're saying that to the record, and we're also saying, and we've testified that there is an application pending with Inland Wetlands, and there's an application forthcoming for planning and zoning for the full use of the property. There was a lot of discussion at the last hearing about the intensity of the project and some of the concerns regarding site distance and also some screening requirements. So as was offered at the last hearing, the commission could condition the installation of a screen fence along the front portion of the property. The big thing that the applicant's trying to do is to, with this permit that we're requesting, try to limit the amount of work that's required for that permit to become effective, so that he's not installing something and then ripping it out in the future. So the concept of extensive paving or other improvements or things like that were things that we were trying to avoid doing. But as was provided at the last hearing and reinforcing now, we would be willing to accept a condition to install a screen fence along the front of the property. There were a lot of discussions about the existing site driveway, and Chief John Salvatore provided some comments about intersection site distance. We have been out there, we've measured the site distance, and there are constraints to that site distance, both based on vertical clearances in the existing roadway geometry, which is being fixed as part of the Pepper Street reconstruction project that's being done by the town and the Department of Transportation. The geometric constraints does limit site distance, but that will be improved as part of the Pepper Street project. there are also some vegetation, there's also some vegetation which restricts site distance. So one other comment that I would like to offer for the commission, if it would help them feel more comfortable with the current application, would be the applicant would be willing to cut down a few trees and clear some brush just to the north of the existing driveway, which would increase that site distance to the maximum extent practical. And this could be done in a way where there would be no land disturbance whatsoever. We could simply cut the trees, leave the root, even leave a foot of stump coming out of the ground. That would clean up that site distance, that would improve the site distance, that would substantially address Chief Salvatore's concern, and it would not require any additional land disturbance, it would not require any additional permit. In fact, I believe the applicant could just do that on its own without requiring without even coming to this commission for that approval. But if it was something that would make the commission feel more comfortable, they would consider approving this application. We could certainly condition that too, to remove some trees just north of the driveway.
Just as clarification, I did not receive any revised information. Typically, when there's an issue of sightline, I would get, a sightline profile that would show what exactly the issues are and what needs to be removed. I would assume you'd be able to provide that.
Certainly, yeah, and I think from a geometric standpoint, I think that this commission, if there are sites that are generally constrained based on vertical geometry of roadways, I don't believe this commission typically requires applicants to mill and lower roads, especially if there's a federally funded municipal or state project that's going to address that same concern. So I believe that this commission could act upon that with that understanding.
However, in a situation like this, and I've pointed out as well that my additional concern is that there isn't enough clearance to come out of the property with a truck without encroachment over the center line. What happens with a site like this, when you develop the site, I think you know, is that you have to show us the best sight line that could be achieved on that property. So if the sight line can be improved by sliding the driveway north or south, that's something that we would look for. So that's some additional information that I'd be looking for so that we could appropriately locate the driveway. And I realize that you have another application coming in that
Right.
you're doing that, but in the land use world where you have an application in front of you that we don't know whether it'll be there for 2 days or 20 years.
Well, we do, because we're proposing that this be sunsetted.
Even if it were approved, we don't know that, because it could be approved and it never gets built, such as your Walmart and several other applications. So we have to make sure that each application stands on its own, that if you have this use, that you have a driveway that's in the best place and will function the best that we can get at. You're right, they can't deny on the grounds that you don't have a sight line in a driveway as they could with a subdivision, a creation of a subdivision. But they can require that you put it in the best location. So that's the information that we need so we can.
Yeah, and again, the purpose of this application, as we've discussed at length, is that we're trying to simply get a permit so that the applicant can secure a loan to buy the property and to pursue the ultimate build out of the property. Because the reality is, whether it's this applicant or the current landowner, no one can use this property for anything other than a single family home. This is an industrial zone property on Pepper Street. It's been identified in the POCD that we want to try to encourage the utilization of industrial properties. And frankly, the fact that no one can use this property for anything at this point without some sort of permit to be issued, that creates an issue for the landowner, and it creates an issue for anyone who's possibly looking at investing in the community and purchasing this property to do something different. If the standard,
How's that an issue?
Well, it is an issue in this situation, as we've testified.
If somebody has a commercial retail center for dry retail, they can't put in a restaurant without getting a permit.
You're absolutely right, but no one can use this property under the industrial regs without getting a permit from this commission.
And the guy next door that has the industrial facility approved can't change it without getting a permit from this commission either.
You're right.
So I don't get what that point is.
There are contractual
Everybody
implications here.
Everybody needs a permit, and
Yep.
each permit needs to comply with the regulations.
Mhm.
So if you can comply with the regulations, you'll get the permit.
Well, again, I believe that what we've provided, with the exception of the different of interpretation on whether or not vehicles have to be stored inside or outside, we believe that it does comply. There are other components. The parking of vehicles needs to be in areas that are paved. There are areas in the property that are currently improved that could be used for parking. The issue of screening, we've proposed a way to address that, which doesn't require
You
substantial.
haven't presented that, though, you've only verbalized it.
Well, that's part of the record is our presentation, so if we offer something as
You
that
really need to provide the detail of that as well. I mean, we're getting into the weeds here, but the reality is just offering something up isn't the same thing as actually
Well,
presenting it.
I believe that the commission can condition things based on testimony provided during the public hearing, and that's been established by precedent by this commission and throughout the state of Connecticut. So
They can, and I
Yeah.
would caution them to be careful with that.
Of course.
For instance, the sightline information, they shouldn't condition it on you proving that the sightline is actually safe.
I testified that there is limitations to the site distance based on existing geometry, which will be addressed by a federally funded state and local project, which is currently in the design phase and moving
If it's
towards
implemented,
construction.
and it may not be.
You're absolutely right. And in situations like this or any other situations, again, this property, right now, the frontage along this property presents site distance issues in its current configuration. What we've done is we've offered some, I've analyzed the site distance and I've offered a way to improve the site distance to the maximum extent practical based on cutting some trees and removing some foliage and vegetation, which is right up against the travel way. Again, I was trying to simplify this, right? Most applicants and most property owners in this community, as this commission is well aware, would typically just do what they want to do. They would park trucks out here, they would buy the property, they would put equipment out there, and they wouldn't come to this commission for a permit. And then this commission would have to deal with a zoning violation.
But he has
Our-
a certain, hold on. He has a certain requirement he needs.
Yes.
In order to get bank approval, and that's why he's here.
I also strongly advised him not to do that, because not to just use the property and close on the property and just
No,
use
what
it.
I'm saying is.
So it's
but I mean,
twofold.
the bank would like to know if it's a commercial piece of property. correct?
Absolutely.
Not. So that's why he's here, to do this.
Correct.
And so.
Well, and it's also because we're trying to establish that he's trying to do the right thing. If you wanted to, and I think a lot of the other discussion during the last presentation where there was discussions on limiting the type of vehicles that could be parked here, nothing that would require a CDL, limiting the number of vehicles that would be here, limiting the number of days those vehicles would come in and out of the site. And I think all those things were offered as
Well, I was
ways.
gonna ask you, there was a lot of back and forth, and this thing morphed tremendously during the
did.
last hearing. So where do we stand today? What is the applicant looking for?
I believe, and to summarize based on what was discussed, because there were a lot of different avenues, you're absolutely correct. Our current application is for the storage of building materials and construction equipment. Pickup trucks, those could constitute construction equipment. So we believe that what we'd want to do in terms of parking vehicles on this property would fit within that as a use with the extensive limitations that are being proposed in terms of number of vehicles that we can fine tune. We said that part of the thing was we want to limit the vehicles to 4 vehicles on the property. So I think that's something that we'd be happy to accept as a condition. We offered to have the special exception permit be conditional and have a sunset provision so that it would expire as of January 1st, 2019. This isn't something that we're looking to try to secure for a long-term process. We're simply trying to get something so that the applicant can close on the property, proceed with his full special exception permit application, and actually and invest in the community to build that manufacturing facility.
So you're making it less intensive then?
Yes, and we agreed to it at the last hearing.
Originally said you weren't, but originally I thought you were implying you were not gonna make.
Oh, no, apologize if that was if I implied that. I was getting to the fact that all of the concessions that we agreed to make as part of the last presentation, we're agreeing to again, and I'm further verifying that for the record.
But you're still not proposing to do any paving or striping or stormwater management as part of this application?
We are requesting the commission not require that because we are proposing a full wholesale redevelopment of the property. That application is pending with wetlands. Our public hearing is on the 13th of this month. Our P&Z application would have been submitted yesterday, but the architect needed some additional time to finalize the elevations and the floor plans for the buildings that are being proposed. We are requesting not to have to do any stormwater improvements. We're not substantively changing the land. We're proposing not to do any alterations for the property whatsoever because we don't want to be put in a situation where we have to do improvements for this and then rip those improvements out and build them again in the future as part of another application.
And indoor storage now, or is it?
No, we're not even proposing to use the house at
storage
all.
at all?
No.
Just parking for pickup trucks?
Yep.
So is it strictly pickup trucks? Or is it
Yeah, that's what the applicant offered at the last hearing.
simply
Yes,
pickup
4
trucks?
vehicles.
No excavating equipment, no.
No. And listen, I wholeheartedly understand that this is a unique application, and I do not want to put the commission in a uncomfortable situation. We've tried to do this in a way that gives the commission as much protection as possible. We've tried to severely limit the use. He just simply needs some sort of permit to satisfy a lender obligation so that he can actually secure a loan, close on the property, and continue the balance of his permitting.
So,
But Mr. Solly, what you're doing is you're asking the commission to approve an application that in no way meets any of the requirements of our regulations.
I disagree with that. I don't agree that it in no way doesn't comply with the regulations. And if there are specific items that we can discuss, I'd be happy.
Paving, striping,
There's pavement out there.
stormwater, there's no paving on that site.
There's surfaces that, there's improved surfaces.
There are surfaces that
would
maybe
allow
don't grow
for-
grass, but there's no paved areas, you know, fully paved areas on the site for parking of vehicles. You're not proposing any line striping, you're not proposing any signage, you're not proposing to increase the driveway or the sight lines, you're not
Well,
proposing any of the things that any other application you bring before us entails. I don't have to tell you what's required for an application. You know better than me what's required for an application. And this one doesn't meet it, in my opinion. There are too many factors that are left out, and you're asking the commission to sign off carte blanche on an application that in no way meets the zoning regulations.
If the commission, if that's how the commission feels, it's
I
an
can't speak for the
unfortunate.
entire commission, I'm speaking for myself.
Well, I understand that, and it's unfortunate if that's well, we disagree in some of those aspects. You know, I had a discussion with Will today about the driveway and a commercial driveway standards. There's nowhere in the zoning regulations that establish what a commercial driveway standard is. You know, in terms of parking of vehicles, there is surface on this property which we believe meets the intent of what the regulation says. There may not be line striping, that's correct. If the commission wanted to require line striping for the parking spaces as a condition of approval, I think that's something we could certainly accept. But in terms of the surface treatment, I do believe that there's surface treatment out there that does meet the intent of what the commission is doing. We're not proposing any land disturbance. We're not proposing to pave any areas with millings. We're not proposing to establish any new parking areas. We're simply proposing to use the area that exists on the property to park a few vehicles so that there can be a permit issued, so they can proceed with the balance of the application. We've offered, there was a comment about screening. We've offered a way to screen those vehicles, so that complies with the regs.
So you feel this is the minimum that has to be done in order to get a change of use
If we,
for the bank, to satisfy the bank, is 4 pickup trucks on the property. That's the minimum that the bank, that would be required by the commission to give you a change of use.
that would be the bank requires a permit to use it for some sort of industrial use.
Right.
Parking of vehicles is the least intensive use. And it also, but
What
the other
about
component is,
storage?
it's also, well, we've talked about the storage, and it's been very clear by the planner that any storage has to be tied to the principal use of a building. So if we're not proposing the principal use of the building to be something, then we are not eligible for any
You're
outdoor
proposing
storage.
the principal use to be changed to commercial, to industrial.
But we're not proposing to use the building because that isn't part of this application. We're not proposing we're not proposing any storage inside the building, we're not proposing any
Is that
improvements to the
because
building.
But it's part
And
of the
frankly,
parcel.
it is part of the parcel, you're absolutely right, but part of the concern with that too, right, was if we were to propose to change the building, there was some discussion at the last hearing about what if we put an office in there? The issue then comes in, we then have to do improvements to that building so it complies with ADA requirements. We have to replace a bathroom. We have to make sure that it meets all those components. We're trying to limit the amount of effort required at this phase because all that's going to be done at a future, another application. And I know that it's difficult for us to divorce the two because it is an independent application, and that's why we're proposing all these restrictions on this application that the commission is completely within their right to condition as part of a special exception permit application.
So, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
This is all about timing,
Yes.
and you don't have enough time with the bank to see the other application through.
It's both the lender and the seller, correct.
And we've had situations similar to that in the past, and has asked for a letter from the town, the staff, that just verifies that a piece of property is an approved lot and is zoned such that such and such can be built there, so as long as it complies with the regulations. Isn't that what the bank wants to know?
No, the bank wants to know that they can actually use it for something. Because that letter from that letter from staff would be great, because you're right. It would say it's zoned industrial, and if you get a permit that complies with the regs, you can do this, that, and the other thing.
It's gonna say it can be used for everything that's in the zoning regulations.
You're absolutely
under that
right.
use.
But the problem is, a letter saying you can use it subject to doesn't satisfy the requirement that it needs a permit for something, right? The bank's not gonna lend on something that's subject to if they can't use it for anything right now other than a single-family home. They don't wanna use it for a single-family home, and the bank's not gonna lend to someone to buy a piece of property if they're not going to use it as a single-family home. That doesn't justify the
So-
cost
The other
associated with it,
Why
or
don't they
the.
get an agreement to, that's contingent on the approval?
This is
the property.
the loan that was pursued was a specific
Not the
SBA loan that
those-
had certain
not the
requirements.
loan. The property owner typically would, the sale is pending contingent on approval.
The agreement with the property owner has a provision in there on when that agreement has to be executed, and there wasn't sufficient time. And again, we came before the commission talking formally months and months ago, right? We weren't fully released to actually do all the work associated with preparing a full application, but by the time that happened, there was only so much time left in their agreement with the seller, right? So we're not, and there's a zoning contingency associated with the agreement with the seller too. So both the lending agreement and the agreement with the seller both have these requirements. We were trying to simply find a way to do it as quickly as possible.
I get that, but you can get extensions with the seller. I mean, that's maybe not as hard as fast as the bank issue. But the other quandary I think people were thinking about, perhaps they're not, but I think they are, is, so if we understand this, we have a condition with the bank. And if you get some kind of use, any use other than the existing use, which is already permitted and allowed, they're gonna give you this loan to do something different than what you get in the permit for.
Yes. Listen, you're absolutely right, but banks don't make sense. Lending agreements, how long is your mortgage agreement? What kind of provisions are in there? I mean, I'm with you.
A lot of times what they'll do though is they'll put the bank they'll ask the bank to contact us.
It's also a federal SBA loan, so there's other components as well. It actually, this specific loan actually requires that they maintain existing structures and they expand upon existing
It's a little
structures.
scary that a federal backed loan would do that. 'Cause
There are a
I'm
lot
not
of
crazy.
issues with
My
federal
tax
backed
paying-
things.
Well, my
I'm
tax
with
paying
you.
perspective, that's a good thing.
I'm 100% with you.
All right, let's go back to the board.
We're digressing.
So you have something to show us how you can fix the sight line for them?
I'd simply say, we'd want to, there's a tree immediately north of the side driveway, right here. I'd want to cut down trees and remove vegetation within 20 feet to the north of the driveway. That would improve the sight distance.
Let me demonstrate something here. Just look at this plan, okay? So you see this road, right? And there's an angle point, and it's right here. The driveway's back here. So just forgetting about vertical curve at the moment, one would think that if you move the driveway over to here, your sight line's gonna be greatly improved because you're at the PI of the curve. So just looking at this plan, I say to myself, it's likely that you can do better. Whether you can cut a tree over here, great. If you move the driveway over here, you're gonna do better. Cut more trees over here and over there, and you're gonna get a better sight line. Show me. I
Scott.
usually get that information as part of the application. I'm okay with discussing that and going over that and agreeing with you and saying, yeah, we can do that. Let's make it a condition. But you haven't provided anything.
Scott, we're proposing not to do any land disturbance as part of this application because we don't want to do anything that then is going to get ripped up and done
Well,
again
but
later.
you
That's the
gotta-
whole purpose.
You have to
That's
Can I
respect
ask
the
you a different
commission
question?
that they don't know that. They have to assume.
we've testified to that.
It doesn't matter, you can say anything, you can say that, but the day after you get the approval, you can sell this to someone else, and that thing could happen, and it could be there for the next 30 years.
No, it cannot. We're requesting this to be conditioned with a sunset provision.
Okay, even with the sunset, whether that can be done or not, it would be there for that year. You could sell it tomorrow.
It would be there for 6
And
months.
for the next, well, all right, 6 months, and someone would be operating it, and so it could live.
So that's a different
But
issue.
the point is that it needs to comply, they need to find that if it's existing as is, that complies. They have to make a rationalization based on the criteria for the special exception permit, the general criteria which talk about, you have to make a finding on each one of those things, that the existing condition meets those conditions, and then you find the specific requirements, they have to make a finding that meets those specific requirements. So that's the one issue, but at the other end, when you need this thing for the, not that we should be getting in this business of doing things just to satisfy the lending conditions, do you just need the commission's approval, or do you need to actually be operating?
We need a permit.
I
We need an
define-
approval.
Define
Excuse me,
what
we need
level
a-
of
we need a-
permit you
We need an approval.
So if you were to have plans to build the Taj Mahal on this property, you could get that approval, and the commission gave you that approval, you would satisfy the bank and you would never have to put a shovel in the ground, or do you have to put the shovel in the ground?
No, we just need an approval. The
So
problem
why
is
does it
that
matter if you're gonna live in the fictional world of not doing anything with this property and that meets the code? Come up with the fictional plan that shows how it really works and never put the shovel in it.
the timing at which it takes to pursue and secure an approval from this commission is too extensive for us to have done that as quickly as this conditional temporary permit could have been issued. This commission has made great strides. You've now actually changed your process so that when an application is made, you have a public hearing within 30 days. The process with staff is streamlined. We can actually discuss a lot of these things during the process. We made this application. It's taken 60 days to have this public hearing because that was the process in which this commission acted upon until after this application was submitted. The amount of time that it takes to prepare engineering plans, to do everything else, to satisfy those requirements is extensive and a lengthy process. It was impossible for us. There were certain aspects of the application that we absolutely had to meet. We had to provide a survey. We had to provide a radius map. We had to, provide a narrative, all those things. As quickly as we had that information available, we made our application because we knew that the process to go through a permit approval in this municipality is a long one. We could not have, yes, I agree with you. We could have submitted our application and get that approved, and then that would have been great. But there was no way that was possible based on how this commission handles applications.
This commission operates faster than the statutory requirements allow. And to say otherwise, that this commission takes longer to do this than any other community is absurd.
I take exception to it too, because we process quicker, way quicker than the state statutes allow. And the state statutes allow towns to process applications for a reason. That timeline was established for a legal reason. There's a reason why it takes that long. And the reason is exactly what you just said. There's all these issues, sightline. For instance, this is a piece of property, an existing piece of property, and our MS4 permit requires that you reduce the, you're saying there's an impervious surface to park vehicles on. Our permit requires that you reduce that by 2%. Have you done that? You haven't even thought about that. That's part of the process. That's why we have time to review this, because we have to look at all that stuff. And it doesn't matter whether, I mean, we totally hear what you're saying about what your goal is. We understand that, but we have a job to do on our end.
Of course.
Because they can't establish a precedent. Otherwise, you can have all kinds of people in here asking to do cartoon plans that they don't intend to do. So I'm just saying that if I'm before the commission and they're looking to me to say, look, did they do the best they could with the sight line? I want to be in a position where I could say to them, you know, I worked it out with you, and yes, to put it. I can't say that tonight because you didn't provide any info.
We aren't proposing to move the driveway with this application.
Well, is it the best location?
It's in the existing driveway location.
Is it the best location?
It's the existing driveway
Then
location.
I'm not supporting it unless it's the best location. You yourself said you're not even going to build it. So move it over and show the best location.
We're not proposing to build anything.
So show the best location. What's the problem? You had 2 weeks just now to do it. I can't tell you how many other applications you've provided it in less time than that.
Well, in fact, you had the comments in early May.
No, and I'm
And you had the regulations.
I've testified and I'm saying it again. We are not proposing to move the driveway.
We're not asking you to. We're asking
You
you
are.
to show it on the plan in a compliant way. If you choose not to build it, that's your choice, but you have to get an approval. If you're asking them to give you an approval, you should respect the regulations and make sure that it complies. That's all we're saying.
We've offered that.
Well, it doesn't comply with the best sight line. I don't see that.
The regulations do not require us to place driveways based on available site distance. There's nowhere in the regulations where it says that.
You have to do that in order, if that is what is needed to get a sight line that is acceptable, then yes, you do have to do that.
Okay, let me just make a point. It's not worth it.
You know, I'm just saying that.
Scott, I'm happy to work with you and show you. Based on the geometry that's out there, shifting it further south would actually reduce the available site distance.
Okay, and I respect that. So, but we need to do that. You and I need to go through that. That's all I'm saying. I've been waiting since the comments were sent to you to get information. I didn't get anything.
And the response that we provided was the response we're proposing. We're not proposing to do any activity as part of this application.
We understand that.
I know.
Is that where you plan on keeping the driveway?
Huh?
In your next application, is that where you plan on keeping the
No,
driveway?
our next application, we're moving the driveway to the north. Fully improved driveway. It's being designed to accommodate not only the existing geometry, but the proposed geometry. We're taking into consideration the work associated with the Pepper Street. As part of that project, they're going to have a temporary driveway coming in. We're showing where that is, all of that information. We're doing everything that we need to do as part of our normal application process. This is a unique application. We're trying to propose it.
It's frustrating because you're not going to build it.
We're not proposing to build anything.
Actually, it's not unique. There is an application many years ago that was approved in this town where they came in and they said, let us get started. We want to get started. Let us go into the building. Let us go and start our operations, and we'll come in with a full application. Commission reluctantly at the time agreed to that. It let them start our operations. The town staff, and this is not me nor Scott, this is many years ago, previous staff, had to spend many months chasing them to come in with that application. They eventually came in with the application. The application eventually was approved, but the finalization of the conditions were never implemented, and they continued to operate the facility for many years afterwards. And shame on the town for not chasing further, but that's what happened. It basically said, let me in, don't worry, I'm gonna come in with another application. They never did. And that property now is derelict and is not being used.
Did that applicant include provisions and propose conditions that would limit the scope and intensity and duration of that special exception permit?
The conditions were all spelled out similarly in that fashion, that they had to do something else to get to the next step. They didn't do those things. They didn't perform. They did not perform on it. Now, eventually, they went out of business on their own accord, and the property is now derelict. But my analogy is, it was, trust me, I'm gonna go do it.
We're not saying, trust me. We're putting in provisions so that there's teeth to what we're requesting. We're not saying, trust me, don't put a sunset provision on it. We're proposing a sunset provision. We're trying to do everything that we possibly can to satisfy this ridiculous requirement that we're trying to comply with.
And, again, I'm not unsympathetic to that, and I don't think the commission is either. But again, as Scott said, you're putting the commission in a position to basically take a contrary position on several factors, maybe not in every factor. Some of the factors you've addressed to some extent, like a fence and maybe something else. And there may be other things that they can rationalize out and make unique to this so that it complies. But there are some things I really don't think that you are doing. I mean, the pavement alone is a condition that those areas are supposed to be paved. What is out there is not what the regulations require. So you're asking the commission to kind of not apply that regulation.
We believe that it meets the intent of that.
And the same thing with the driveway. There may not be a full specification for what a commercial driveway is, but there's a whole lot of precedents, and there are a whole lot of other standards in there that lead you to what it has to be. There's good engineering practices which you're well aware of, and you're gonna be signing these drawings, so you need to make sure it's safe as well. So doesn't need to be a full specification of what a commercial driveway is. And in fact, there are other remnants in the code, if you look throughout the code.
We have.
Where it even tells you what that is.
We have. Well,
And there are things that actually say 24 feet.
For internal driveways, internal drives on a piece of property.
This is an internal driveway.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is.
No, there's other places in the code that go beyond just the parking standards, which show you that 24 feet.
We scoured it,
There are two other instances specifically in the AR district and
which
in.
this is not.
No, it's, granted, they are not related to this district of use. My point is that they're giving guidance as to what is a certain threshold. The commission uses that when they make a determination where they have discretion. They compare it to where they're doing it in other places. So they can't say in one hand, you need 24 feet here, but you don't need 24 feet. It's hard to make that determination, even though the reg may not say specifically in that. But in the discretionary aspect of determining it's safe and it's appropriate and it deals with the intensity of the operation, where they've emphatically said what it should be here, it's kind of hard to do something different.
We believe that what we've offered with the restrictions that we've provided, the additional commentary provided, we believe that the commission can act on this application. If the commission doesn't feel the same, then we understand that.
Do you have any other new information that you want to make part of the public hearing record? Or should we open it up to the commissioners and see if anyone has questions?
Yeah, I offered the additional information that I wanted to offer on the record was the analysis of the site distance, and then the fact that there is a way to improve that site distance based on removing some existing vegetation immediately north of the driveway. That's the extent of our new information.
Okay.
So, you showed us the, future plans that we're not talking about, but why not just put in the driveway where you're gonna put it? And then call out the driveway?
It requires additional disturbance that we're trying to avoid as part of this application.
I mean, it does the sight lines, it's gonna, as you showed, it moves it over, it keeps it kinda all straight. You're not gonna tear it up afterwards, cause that's where you're eventually going. Do it, park 4 cars on it, I mean, I don't know. I just don't understand why not just do that and then,
We were trying to propose something that would not require any physical alteration to the property.
well, then wouldn't that just be turning that building into storage and putting some building supplies inside and calling it a day for the next couple of months?
Unfortunately, in order to use that building for commercial operation, it means it would require interior renovations to comply with ADA.
Even if it's just for storage, not an office, not, if you're using it as a storage container.
Any commercial use would require you provide at least one handicap parking space, which means we'd have to construct and build a handicap parking space. So we were trying to propose something that didn't require any physical alteration of the property. And frankly, I would love to hear if this commission had another idea on how to do something, because I'm sure this may come up for other properties somewhere else. If you have an existing non-conforming use, is there any simpler way?
Yeah, Karen, why don't you just take this plan, show 24 feet right here, out up there, and then show two handicap parking spaces,
Because that would require regrading.
and then say, proposed office, and make the little corner of the house industrial office, and all you're doing is you're gonna make the driveway wide enough so that you can have a commercial driveway.
It would require interior renovations as well.
But you can get your permit, you're gonna get your permit from them, which is what you need, and you don't have to build it. So just show this plan, it'll take you probably an hour to doctor up the plan. You show the driveway that they're asking for, you show 2 handicap spaces, and you put a proposed office on there for 2 employees to have an industrial office with a phone and 2 desks, and you get your permit, and that's what you need, right?
Look,
I'm just trying to help you.
No, I understand what you're saying, but part of what we've discussed is that he wants to be able to park vehicles there.
You just told them that they're not gonna park the vehicles.
No, I did not say that.
Well, you said
No,
4
no,
pickup.
4 pickup trucks.
Right, they want to be able to park 4 pickup trucks there
Okay,
without
so-
having to redo the
so park
driveway and
2.
pave
Park
an
2.
area.
Park 2.
Two, I mean, what, you just need a permit.
Build
You
4
just-
parking
You
spaces.
just told us all you need is the
We
permit.
can't park there until we finish those improvements. We're trying to do something that doesn't require improvements on the property.
Again, I asked you before, do you need the commission's approval or shovel in the ground?
The
You said
applicant
commission
was here at the last hearing and said he wanted to be able to park vehicles here. We're trying to do that without having to do
But you
physical
just told them
alterations to
that
the
all you
property.
need is a permit.
Do you want to get the funding, or do you want to do?
If you want the
Let's-
funding, just,
Let's let the commissioners
Yeah.
see if there's questions. Ken,
So, again,
or Ryan,
well,
I'm sorry.
you finish. Yeah, but the big concern, and, you talk about the sunset clause, is the sightline, it'll be done and different in January, but the problem is, which they had mentioned, and we took care of with the big vehicles, is you still have, if he wants to park trucks there for a reason, he's gonna be using those trucks, and that's until January of trucks coming out on a road, and the person in that truck and people coming down that road in danger. That's the concern. It's not gonna be there after January, but that's still a couple months where, something could happen. So that would be the concern with me with the sightline.
And what we'd offer to address that is that a condition be put in that does not allow any CDL, any commercial vehicles that would require a CDL, or I believe it was over 2,600 pounds,
25, 26.
26,000, I believe, the applicant testified at the last hearing. None of those would be parked here.
And I would be curious just to see what Salvatore would think about that, because I know his concern was slow-moving large vehicles. He didn't say anything about pickup trucks coming out, so that's about it.
That it, Ryan?
Yep, that's it.
Ken?
I don't have any questions, but I've been reading about it, so I'm just gonna hold off on this. But I've seen bigger trucks come out of this
This
place,
property.
this property, only because I used to own a dump truck, and I've seen them come out of there, but it's tough to see. But if you cut all that foliage down and just make it where people could see, because people just don't go 20 miles an hour up Pepper Street. That's a super highway over there. They like to go 50, and that's a hill, or a little crest of one. I think it just puts people at risk in a lot of different things. So it's just a simple thing to fix it, so people can see both the drivers and the people.
Right.
Because I don't want to get whacked by one of the trucks,
No, absolutely
So,
not.
But I think that would be probably the quickest thing to get your permit, because you end up gonna fixing it up anyway after you get the permit, it's gonna make, you know, whatever. That's my own thought.
Thank you.
John?
First, congratulations on your new child.
Thank you.
Um,
We have 3 under 4 years old, so
Oh.
I'm in that
Good luck.
zombie no sleep mode, but, thank you.
So, again, the sight line's not the best, but I think clearing up the brush and the trees will certainly help. But I guess my main concern, and I'll have to ask Will about this, was that does the town attorney have a timeline on getting back on the sunset provision, or he just didn't know what to do with it? Was he gonna get back on it?
I mean, I only talked to him at the end of business today, and we were doing it off the top of our heads from the conversation. He was unavailable last week for personal reasons. We did not go further than what we were able to talk about, because we knew we had the hearing tonight. So,
Okay.
I mean, he's waiting for you to decide what you're doing. If you want more from him, if this continues, he's happy to deal with that.
All right, I mean, I'd like to know a little bit more about the commission's authority to put that sunset provision forward before going forward with this application, only because I think that would make some important difference in improving this application. I don't have any other questions.
I guess I would just offer real quick, I know that our attorney, who's practiced land use in the state of Connecticut for
She didn't get us.
longer than I've been here, she did say that that was completely within your right to provide that as a condition, but I understand.
You
Yep,
know,
I
we
just-
just need the town.
Just putting it on the record, just saying stuff.
Yeah.
I think the type of loan that you're getting is
I-
that he has to have an established business on this property, I would imagine.
I'm not privy
That's
to
the
any of
only
those
way,
documents,
okay.
I'm just,
I would, but I'm just saying that's why, you know, in Scott's defense, with you putting up an application or whatever, I think he needs to park vehicles, commercial vehicles on there because he has to show that he has an established business there in order to get the loan. I would imagine that's kind of what he's getting. Because like Scott said, even if you show the plan, you brought it to the bank to make you say, okay, but I'd imagine that he has to have an established business on that property before he gets the loan. And I understand your point, but is that the point, is that why?
I'm not familiar with the specifics of the loan, I just know that he said he needed an approval to satisfy both the lending and the contractual obligations.
And that's what I was asking, because is it gonna carry to the point where you need an approval from the CEO and the building inspector? Because there you're gonna get hung up, because the building inspector's probably gonna have issues if it's going from residential to commercial with the status of that drive.
We're not proposing to use the building for anything.
No, I got it. I'm saying you want to be able to
The-
park.
No,
the type-
I
you know
do,
what the-
I do want to hear what you have to
Excuse
say.
me, the type of loan, the terms of the loan are no concern
Right.
to this commission. All right, stick to the land use issues.
But then why wouldn't we be able to put an application in to show what he wanted to do there?
It's the timing. And I didn't mean to insult the town before. This town does a great job of processing applications and making sure the applications are much tighter than is required in other municipalities. That being said, other municipalities process applications much quicker than this community. Probably a detriment to those communities.
Yeah, I have not, the only problem I have is like you said with the sunset provision, is we don't have any
We have legal,
definition on,
we've offered an illegal opinion on the record saying that's completely within the commission's authority to do as part of a special exception permit.
Anything else?
I'm good.
Paul?
Well, I want to understand the existing situation here. This is an existing industrial district zone.
The property is zoned I-1.
Yes, correct.
The house has been, it predates the zoning.
It's a
It's a
non-conforming,
pre-existing, non-conforming residential property.
okay, in an industrial zone.
Correct.
And they want to park 4 pickup trucks on the property.
They want a change of use for an industrial use.
It's in an industrial zone.
It's a single-family
not
development, it's a
industrial.
single-family lot, and the application is to change it from a residential single-family lot to an industrial use.
In
Which
an
is more than
industrial-
just parking for trucks.
To park
In
for
it.
trucks.
Yes,
Well, if parking the Ford trucks is the industrial activity,
Right.
yes, but it's changing it to an industrial use.
In an industrial zone.
Yeah.
And all those uses are, contingent upon an SEP approval.
But they're not proposing any physical changes to the property.
That's what they're,
That's what their
that's
goal.
what they're saying,
Right.
yes.
So I don't understand what the issue is, honestly.
The conjecture is that if you apply the regulations to go from the residential use to the commercial use, no matter how small, you have to bring the site up to the commercial requirements and meet the findings, which you can decide how you meet them. So you've got to go through all the criteria for the special exception permit and have a findings that the intensity of 4 trucks, whatever, meets the standards, and you have to spell that out. If you remember your resolutions, we make findings of all those standards.
Okay.
Okay, Michael?
Well, so you actually do want to use it. The applicant does want to use those 4 trucks.
yes.
So
Yes.
it's gonna be going in and out of there at least once a day with all 4 trucks, presumably.
Yes, yes. And we're looking to do that without requiring any substantive alterations to the land, other than what we've offered as installing a fence, cutting down some trees.
Philosophically, I have no problem with parking 4 trucks there. And if you cut down, make the sight lines the best you can, it's already in an industrial area. I don't know about setting precedent, though. That's my only concern, is ignoring half of the regulations now to allow this, just because it's only for 6 months.
And I certainly don't believe that we're completely ignoring the regulations. We've provided a response point by point to Will's comments. We believe that there are mechanisms to satisfy those requirements. This commission has the ability to do that.
I'm not sure what else they could do. I mean, if they were to approve it, what else could they do?
They have an application before wetlands right now for a major renovation on this property.
Understood, but that needs to go through the process.
Pardon me?
That needs to go through the process.
Correct.
Right, but we're not talking
Just like
about-
any application
Right,
needs
we're
to go
not, but
through
we're
the
not here,
process.
we're not approving this. We're approving the change of use and to simply park 4 trucks on the property, 4 pickup trucks. They really, if there's no other work being done on the property, they can't do anything else.
They could park more trucks there.
Well, not if we
Or more
approve it
equipment.
for 4 vehicles, 4 pickup trucks, if that's what the condition
They
of
stick to
approval
the
is.
approvals.
The other conditions could be they can't use the house for anything. They're not gonna build anything new, right? They would need other approvals for that.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what else they could physically do on the property.
No, you're looking at it in the reverse, right? That is all true, no matter what it is. Even if they built a 10,000 square foot building, they can only use it for what you approve it for. You can't do anything else. You have to find that the existing conditions, as is adequate and complies with the tenets of the industrial district and the requirements of the special exception permit for what it is they're proposing to do. So you gotta go through each one of those things and make a determination that what they're proposing meets that.
Do you have any other questions?
No.
Michael, you
No.
done? I don't have any questions at this time. Let's just see if anybody from the public. Is anyone who would like to speak in favor of this application? Anyone? If you'd like to speak, now's the time. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this application? Is there anyone who has any general questions or comments concerning this
You have an
application?
existing factory across the street.
Excuse me, sir, come up and identify yourself, please. Just your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. It's Brian Cummings, 4 Hickory Lane, Sandy Hook. My wife is one of the owners. And there's a factory across the street that pulls 40-foot trailers in and out of there all day long. There's dumpsters. This is nothing new. People pull in and out with that sightline all day. You've never had any major accidents. And the other question is, if everything depends on your legal counsel to interpret, why isn't he here? The town had plenty of money when they were fighting Patrolman Wall to come back to work for the lawyer. They would never disclose how much they spent for that, but they won't spend the money to have him here at these meetings. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Well, Mr. Solly, I think we're at the end of our timeline statutorily for this hearing.
We don't have another meeting before our 35 days is up.
And frankly, I mean, the applicant, I think their deadline is mid-June. So we're already at the end of that time frame too. We tried to do our best to interpret the regulations, to determine a path to satisfy our client's goals. That's all we can do as consultants. We thought this was the least intrusive way to do it. We were hoping that we could do it in a way that would satisfy the commission, to give you guys enough teeth so that you could feel comfortable with what we're proposing. We understand if there's still reservations about that. We feel that there are sufficient ways to address that. You know, I'm actually, you know, we're fortunate because, not fortunate, but when I couldn't come to the last hearing, we happened to have one of the premier land use zoning attorneys to step in for me who can actually offer a lot of legal opinions on this application. We're very fortunate for that. Because I think this application needs, and this commission needs, legal opinions on the record to substantiate this type of application. The only legal opinion that's been offered into the record has been by an attorney, has been on our side. And I understand there's been conversations with counsel, but there wasn't anything provided. We don't know if it was provided based on an actual hearing and understanding and listening to our counsel.
Okay, it was based on the code.
I understand.
He was analyzing the code, not.
I understand. So I guess, you know, we'd like to close the hearing. We'd like to understand if the commission feels that they can support this application. But if the commission, if the general consensus among the commission is that there's no way they can support this application, we need to know that too.
Well, what does the commission feel? Should we close this hearing?
Before you close the hearing, I just have one more question that might be of benefit. Are you willing to post, this is a unique situation because usually we get a site stabilization and restoration bond.
Right, for disturbance.
Because you're proposing the sunset clause, I guess that's what I refer to, would you be willing to post a performance bond?
We're not proposing to perform anything.
I'm just trying to help you here. Would you be, in other words, would you be willing to post a performance bond to assure that if they end up accepting this clause that says that it's good for a year or 6 months, whatever it is, that it would assure that they would have bonding to, you know, help remove whatever the 4 vehicles or whatever is out there at the property?
You cannot implement such a bond.
Well,
Yeah, I think performance,
Remove personal property?
I'm only trying. Can't say I'm not trying.
thank you.
So, what does the commission feel?
I mean, we really can't leave it open, right?
Well, the only way we could leave it open is if the applicant would grant us an extension of time, but I don't think based on
Doesn't sound
Mr.
like they
Soli's
can.
comments, that's,
We don't want to do it.
I recommend we approve it with certain conditions.
wait, we're
that-
not in deliberation,
Yeah,
we're
no,
saying
yeah.
whether or not we're gonna open it, we're saying whether or not we're going to continue the hearing or close.
In that case,
Close
we
it.
would close it.
So you wanna close it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have to close it.
Close.
Close.
Okay, Mr. Solly, hearing's closed,
Thank you.
thank you.
We don't do a lot of these. Sorry, I try not to.
All right, next up, item number 7, SCP 2014-14-83, 50 Cambridge Drive, Axle Plastics, Industrial District 2, permit approval amendment modification proposing material, exterior storage containers, 3 exterior overflow tanks, chain link fence storage compound, reconfiguration of parking, and relocation of dumpster enclosure and reserved parking. Owner Cambridge Drive Realty LLC, and this is reconvened from May 3rd. Any new exhibits, Will?
There is one, and that was what we were waiting for at the last one. I did not read it into the record at the last meeting because we didn't open, because the applicant wasn't here. But Exhibit 23, notice certificate decision amendment to the previous approval from the Inland Wetlands Commission. So they got an approval relative to the improvements that are being asked. I don't believe there's any specific recommendation, unless Scott can tell us.
Yeah, I'm not remembering anything. It was pretty straightforward.
That was,
They just had a bond.
no, not their conditions. Was there any separate recommendation?
No, there wasn't a separate.
All right, so the Inland Wetlands Commission approved the improvements and did not make a separate recommendation specifically.
Okay, for the applicant.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is David Bjorklund, and I'm representing Axle Plastics. On this application, when we concluded the last hearing, I don't believe there were any open questions except for the inland wetlands approval. I think everything else had been addressed to both sides' satisfaction, so I have nothing to add.
Okay. Does anybody have any additional questions about this? As Mr. Bjorklund stated, it was all reviewed at the first public hearing except for the inland wetlands approval. Anybody, anything? Seeing as the public all got this, I won't ask the public for their comments. All right, you're the public. Do you have any questions? Back to you.
Request that the commission close the hearing. I have nothing to add.
Okay. Yes, yes?
Yes.
Thank you
Hearing's
very
closed.
much.
Thank you. Next up, site plan review. Item number 8, site development plan, we have nothing. Excuse me. Deliberations and determinations. Item number 9, time extensions. Request for extension. SDP 2017-03, file number 123, residence to office, 233, 235 Monroe Turnpike. Dear Commission, in regard to application SDP 2017-03, file number 123, on behalf of EEE Equities LLC, the applicant respectfully requests an extension of an additional 120 days for the above referenced matter to provide additional time for satisfying the conditions of approval. Current expiration date for plan signatures and filing of copies is May 19th, 2018. We appreciate your consideration in this manner.
A little background. If you recall, this was a residential property being converted to offices. That got an approval by this commission of a site plan to make improvements to the property to change that use, including parking and whatnot. They have not provided final plans in compliance with the conditions of your approval. In fact, as we many times find ourselves doing, reached out to them to let them know it was expiring. Otherwise, this would have expired on its own had we not done that, had staff not reached out to them. It's also my understanding from the engineer that he is not producing the final plans because of their own internal dispute with the owner who's not paying them. But nonetheless, we did reach out to the owner to keep his approval alive.
Okay, well,
Was the owner requesting an extension, or?
The owner is
you suggesting
requesting, the owner is requesting it, that's who's writing me the letter. We had originally reached out to Solely Engineering, who's the engineer of record, and they said that that's the owner's responsibility because they're not getting paid. So time ticked by a little bit, we reached out to the owner as well, and then the owner gave us the letter.
Are they allowed this extension?
Yeah, they're allowed the extension, but the 2 points I wanted to make, that had we not reached out to them, this would have expired because they weren't doing anything on their own. Staff typically goes out of its way to tickle people, to remind them of their expirations. And so I'll just give you that backstory. That's what it was.
Want a motion? I'd make a motion to approve the 120-day extension, time extension for SDP 2017-03.
Second.
we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the roll.
Condon, aye.
Rosie, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lisa, yes.
O'Reilly, yes.
Okay, next up. Request for extension, special exception permit amendment modification, SEP 2016-12-A1, file number 1582A, Eastern Land Management, 154 Enterprise Drive, project number 1604501. Dear Mr. Agresta, on behalf of Bruce Moore Sr., we respectfully request an extension of an additional 90 days for the above referenced matter to provide additional time for meeting the conditions of approval. Current expiration date for plan signatures is June 4th, 2018. We appreciate your consideration in this manner.
This relates to, if you remember, Eastern Land Management. This was the old Nagy Brothers properties in the park where they got an amendment plan to, to actually build something on that property. They are in construction. This is related to the amendment they recently got for some changes. They have not finalized the plans. Again, we reached out to the Solely Engineering, reminding them that this was coming up due. The few issues that are outstanding are very minor, and they're so minor I actually forgot what they are, but they're not much of anything.
Right, so it's moving along.
Yeah, this is also, I'm going to have to probably remind them of another part of this, is that if you recall, this is an amendment, but when we did the original approval for the building, the two buildings on the two properties, that was the process as an amendment to an older permit that Nagy Brothers had. For reasons, that's the way it was processed. It does have an expiration of July 9th, 2018. I made that point very clear to their attorney back at the time when that was getting approved. I'm a little surprised I haven't gotten a request to extend that. They're entitled to up to 5 more years, so I'll have to reach out to them on that one as well. That's a separate request, though, that they'll have to make, just so that will come back to you probably.
Okay.
Motion to approve the 90-day time extension for SEP 2016-12-A1.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any other questions? Call the roll.
Condon, approved.
Rosie, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lisa, yes.
O'Reilly, yes.
Item number 10, bond releases or reductions, we have none. Item 11, permit amendment modifications, we have none. Item 12, meeting minutes, May 17th. Do we have those? Michelle?
Yes.
They were in the envelope, right? Okay, we have, yes. Present were Porter O'Reilly, Lisi Ambrosi, and Condon. Anybody?
Motion to accept the May 17th, 2018 meeting minutes as drafted.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any corrections or edits required? No, hearing none, I'll call the roll.
Condon, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lisa, yes.
O'Reilly, yes.
Okay, item 13, pending application deliberations and determinations. Okay, first up, we have RAA 2018-03, file number 998E, Industrial District 3. We have a draft that was prepared by Will. There is actually a two-part amendment. We will be deliberating and voting on this as two separate parts. Neither is dependent upon the other. The first is increasing the maximum height in the I-3 district from 40 feet to 55 feet. The second part is for, in the I-3 district, excuse me, allowing storage silos not to exceed 65 feet in height, nor having a footprint. I thought we said 10%.
Yes, we did. Now I'm a little worried about this draft. Okay, I made it in, that's fine.
It says 10%.
Yeah, I know, yeah, I was a little worried.
So on page 1,
So if you go to page 1 of the actual text amendments, which is the second to last page, it does reflect it
say
there.
10%.
So we have to change it in the
narrative.
in the narrative.
all right, so on page 1 in the introductory narrative, change 20 feet to 10 feet, or 20% to 10%. So not to exceed 65 feet in height, nor have a footprint exceeding 10% of the gross square footage of the principal building footprint that the silo is attached to. No signage, flags, or lights shall be attached to the silo except as may be required for safety purposes at the base of the silo. All such footprints shall include all enclosed overhang.
Oh, wait a second. The reason, I'm gonna backtrack. On page 1, did the applicant agree to the 10?
Pardon me?
Did the applicant amend his application to be 10? Because this is really reflecting what they proposed.
They did not amend their application.
Yeah, so the way I draft, now I'm recalling, the way I drafted, this paragraph on page 1 is reflecting what they proposed.
Okay.
Then, when you go into the whereas clause on page 2, the second to the last two, or the last one, it talks about how you evaluated a 20-foot silo with other percentages, that you noted that 10% appeared to be more than sufficient. And then in your approval of it, you're approving the 10% through the language.
Okay. So page 1 is the original proposed text amendment from the applicant. And then you'll notice on page 2, like Will said, the commission decided on 10% as an acceptable number.
And I would suggest, to be clear for historical purposes, that we add in another, under the amendment to adoption, something that specifically says that you're making the 20% go to 10%. Just so it's clear, so if anyone looks back, it's not like we did a typo. They don't know which is the right one.
Okay.
All right?
And part of the amendments for both cases, where the heights were increased, the minimum yard setback was increased, so any structure over 40 feet, the setback shall be no less than the highest part of the building or structure. So a 65-foot silo would have a 65-foot setback. So let's address these points separately. The first, zoning text amendment 1 for the maximum building height. Do we have a motion?
Move to accept, this is RAA 2018-03. Are they separate files?
No, it's a, that, and then you got text amendment number 1.
All right, so it's one file, number
Yeah, both in the same file.
998E. We'll first accept zoning text amendment number 1, maximum building height.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, I'll call the roll.
Condon, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lacy, yes.
O'Reilly, yes.
And Will, you'll amend this
Mhm.
resolution to put Ryan in place of Bruno?
Yeah, are we using,
He was here for the hearing and,
okay.
right?
But he wasn't part of the deliberation.
We didn't deliberate until not right now.
No, we deliberated the last meeting.
And I said,
You
Our
don't
practice
have to
has not included anyone that wasn't part of the deliberation.
okay.
4 people are enough.
Yeah, 4
So
people.
Ryan,
I take back my vote.
retract your approval.
Abstain.
All right, second item,
A motion to approve RAA 2018-03, filed 998E, zoning text amendment number 2, storage silos, maximum height and footprint.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yes, no? No? Call the roll.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lacy, no.
O'Reilly, yes.
Motion passes.
And Mayne is abstained. Or no vote. Okay. Selected items from this agenda.
You want to start with 50 Cambridge?
Yes. 50 Cambridge. This is Axle Plastics. We had our first public hearing on that on May 3rd. They were proposing some overflow tanks outside the building, adding a storage container with additional landscaping around it, an outside storage pen where they stored empty, they relocated their dumpster, and they added some parking along the back side of the building, or the back end of the building. We continued the public hearing because we did not have the inland wetlands approval. The applicant was here tonight, provided the inland wetlands approval, and we closed the hearing. So that's where we stand. So, comments? Well, you're gonna wanna do a draft on this, or is this a,
If we don't do a draft, you're gonna have to articulate a little bit more, but if you want a draft, that's fine too. I mean, it's already there. It's not gonna change anything. So I can do the draft, be easier.
And
Yeah.
then we'll just vote on it.
Yeah, I'll do the draft.
so Will's gonna do a draft, and what's the general consensus of the seated members for this?
Approve.
Include you.
You weren't here?
Yeah, I would approve it.
Approve.
All right, so Will, you'll do a draft approval for that.
Just a clarification for him to do that is, I had put in here that the original bond is adequate at this point to cover any site stabilization or restoration. They, at inland wetlands indicated, and also they've requested that that bond be released, and that they may want to have separate bonds. Now, inland wetlands bonded for this, the minimum bond amount of $2,500, it's a very small area. That will cover site stabilization and restoration of the whole area. It's all within the upland review area. That's all that's really needed. I don't know if you guys feel that you also need a site stabilization or restoration bond.
Is the work done?
It's what?
Is the work done?
No,
They still have their other.
the work, actually, the construction of the enclosure and the parking area, that's not done. The enclosure fencing on the existing parking area, that's done. But as I'm saying, that the bond that inland wetland is requiring is adequate to cover the site stabilization and restoration. If you were to require a
Don't we
bond,
already-
it would be redundant.
Aren't we already holding a bond?
You're holding a bond, but they've asked for it to be released.
They have not asked us for it to release, have they?
I believe they did. They asked for both. I'm working on
Okay,
that.
I would suggest that you make the existing bond be covered by this, and then at the time that that formal request comes to you, you can decide how much, if any, to release.
Yeah, separate and from the inland wetlands.
Yeah.
If we have our own bond right now,
Right, but
we'll leave a portion of that bond in place.
you can't do that. You can't leave a portion. They
We
have to.
can,
No.
we don't
you
have to
can't.
release the entire bond.
No, but legally, what they're proposing is not covered under the bond.
We're gonna make it with this approval that it is.
Well, yeah, but usually the applicant has the right to say, well, I either want that released or I'll post a new one, because it's a different application. So usually you kind of give them that choice, but I'll work
Well,
with either.
why don't we work that out before the draft is done, and so when it
Yeah,
comes
okay,
to
I
us,
can
that'll
do
be
that.
resolved.
I can do that, I'll call. Yeah,
All right, so Cambridge is done. Next up, 485 Pepper Street. Okay, as you all heard at the first public hearing, and again tonight, just looking to make sure. It's the 4 full members and Ryan, correct?
Yes.
All right, so you two are not part of the deliberation. The applicant has a different, separate application before wetlands right now for their ultimate end product on this site. For their own reasons, they are coming to the commission with a different application which will provide a change of use from pre-existing non-conforming residential parcel to a compliant industrial use on this parcel. And they have made it very clear that they intend to do absolutely no work, and they want the commission to approve their application, knowing that they intend to do no work. So,
Well, they'll cut trees and they'll put
they'll cut a
fence
couple of
up,
trees, yeah,
and that's it.
but there's no site improvement. But they're asking us to approve SEP to allow this use on the site. And as you know, through the numerous applications that have come before the commission, when all of you have been members, you know, our special exception permit applications come with a certain set of requirements to meet our zoning regulations. And they are asking the commission to pretty much waive almost the entirety of our regulations to approve this SEP. So, That's the condensed version of where this application stands. So now I want input from the seated commissioners with your thoughts and opinions.
So, no, I was gonna say, basically, they want us to pull the non-exempt, or the non-compliant use that's already there.
That,
Like, what would happen if we just took that away?
we can't just take that away. That non-conforming, or pre-existing non-conforming use exists. The only way they lose that is if they request a change of use and get an approved change of use for the property.
And they're trying to change it to what it is zoned for, or in the district it's zoned in, but currently not zoned for.
They are asking for an industrial use,
Yeah.
yes.
And it's in the industrial zone, okay.
So they will automatically, by our regulations, they will automatically lose the pre-existing non-conforming status of the property once an approval is made on an industrial use.
And then the other question I had, right now, for what it is zoned for, a single-family dwelling,
It's not zoned for that.
well, what it's being used for right now, single-family dwelling, if could a new family move in there right now?
It's not being occupied.
I know,
Looks
but
like it's-
my question is, so a new family could move in there now if they had 4 licensed drivers, could they then park 4 pickup trucks on that property without any,
There's an accessory use to a residential property, yes.
and they wouldn't have to put in any driveway or anything at that point?
No,
Okay.
And you wouldn't be approving that?
but that would not come to us. That would be.
Yeah.
They can do it
Or
now.
allowed use, or allowed.
You know,
Right.
Yeah, that was just kind of how I also want to look at it. I know it's not what we're approving, it comes down to, are we gonna really ignore regulations that we have?
So there's certain requirements that the applicants have to meet for an SEP, right?
Right.
But that's when they come in with a, I'll say with a project. They're physically not doing anything to the site. What is the risk in approving a change of use? Whatever they propose to do later on, they still have to come back.
Potential risks, you know, anything that we do, any approvals that we grant, you know, they are subject to public review. You know, if the guy next door liked the fact that we approved an SEP and did not meet the terms of our regulations, they could take us to court over it.
But I'm saying, what can the applicant do once we approve the change of use? Anything they do, they have to come back to us, I'm saying.
They can park the 4 trucks there. That's
Right, but
about
what
it.
else can they do? They can't build a building, right? They can't store, or they can't,
Well, they're gonna-
crush gravel on the site.
No, but they're saying that they want an approval for storage and parking
Right, for pickup truck.
and construction-related materials.
Well, they said they would do away with that.
Well,
He said
I'm
just
saying what they
originally.
have asked for.
Right.
Right.
And Mr. Solly reiterated numerous times, they are applying for outside storage of construction materials and vehicles. That's
So
what they're asking.
Your first question is that a permitted use in the zone?
And I don't believe it is,
In an industrial zone,
in an I-1 zone.
industrial,
No.
District 1.
They were claiming the trucks were construction material though, right? They weren't arguing. That
The
was
use is
his,
the storage of construction material and vehicles, I believe it is, what I read it as.
but I know he had the issue, you two kind of did not see eye to eye on.
Well,
He
forget
was
what I
claiming-
say, forget what he says, it's what you all say, it's your
Yeah.
regulations. So the permitted use that they're seeking is called storage of building materials or construction equipment.
Yeah, so
That
that's,
is the use that's listed in the
yeah, he didn't say
specification.
vehicles, but in his what they're arguing is that the trucks are construction equipment,
Right.
is what he's saying.
So first you have to decide what is storage of building materials and construction equipment.
Are you saying
And I
that's not
mean-
allowed in industrial one?
That is the permitted use.
Okay, so that's.
So my analysis was, that is a permitted use, and that is a use that is the principal use within inside a building. And the town attorney, or the attorney for the town, has, in my conversation with him, based on his looking of the code, agreed with that.
Agreed with what?
That it was to be, the principal use is an indoor use.
Does it say that?
Again, is
This-
based on the analysis that if you look at, let me find the section.
The legal opinion of our council is that the regulation, because it does not say outside, it means inside. Because in reviewing our regulations, there are many places where we specifically refer to outside storage or outside uses, and the fact that this does not say outside means that it's inside. That's the opinion from our legal counsel.
So with the inside storage, there's still some allowance for outdoor storage,
20%.
20%. So
As
if-
an accessory use to the inside
Right, so
storage.
if we approve it for that, for the inside storage,
But they're not
They're not
proposing, and they
They don't want that.
adamantly do not want inside storage.
understood. But if they're not requesting it, or they're saying they're not gonna use it?
Oh,
You have to approve a use that's permitted in the
Well, that's what I
code,
was saying,
regardless
that
of what they
if we
want.
approve for indoor storage, which allows 20% outdoor storage, which also I assume allows to park 4 pickup trucks?
absolutely.
Okay, so if they choose not to store anything indoors,
But Paul, I suggested that at the last hearing, and they said, no, we're not using the building.
I-
So I said exactly
right,
that.
they're not using the building. So,
No, they don't, they are not applying for that. We can't approve something they're not applying for. We can't approve them for inside storage. They're not applying for inside storage.
That's-
Yes, I agree. If they said, we want to use the building for inside storage and 20% of that footprint we're allowed for outside storage, and we can park our trucks there. But they would not do that.
they're saying they're not gonna use the building.
They're not going to apply for using the building.
All they want to do is park 4 trucks.
And store construction materials.
I think he said they
Oh,
would give you
got
that.
cut off the thing.
Okay,
So
so
it's just parking the 4 trucks.
let me just paint a picture. Let's say that they're proposing to park 4 construction,
Pickup trucks.
4 construction equipment that happen to be pickup trucks. And that's all they're proposing, let's say. Okay? You first have to determine that being the use that they're saying, they're not gonna use anything else they're saying, that meets with what your regulation allows under the code. And to make a distinction, if you allow 4 vehicles to be outside without a building, you're also saying that a property could potentially have 150 vehicles outside without a building.
But nowhere
Not
in
if it's a
there.
condition of our approval, right?
Your conditions of your approval do not override the permission of the use. You're saying, in the first instance, that the use can be outside. That's the threshold. Whether it's 4 or 1,000, you're saying it doesn't need to be indoors. That's the first threshold issue you have to deal with.
Let me just read the list. These are principal permitted uses in all I districts. General and professional offices, manufacturing plants, research and development laboratories, commercial bulk storage completely contained within a building, special exception uses allowed in all industrial districts. So these are all, have to meet, according to the procedures and standards set forth in Article 8, which is our special exceptions standards. Assembly of electrical appliances, instruments, and products, manufacture and storage of chemical products, manufacture, compounding, assembly, and treatment of articles, indoor and outdoor recreation facilities, medical and dental offices, wholesale and outside storage of, or growing of nursery products, outside storage of raw materials, work in progress, finished products, machinery, waste materials, or other equipment or materials, including trucks used on the premises. Such storage is subject to the specific standards contained in Article 8 of these regulations and must be in an area completely screened from the road and adjacent lots or zones. So I believe that's what they're looking for.
No, this is not what they're looking for. This was 124 Enterprise, if you recall. They're looking for this one. Section 4.35, special exception uses only in an
Okay,
I-1.
only in I-1, storage of building materials or construction equipment.
And the premises that were being made, and which the attorney was also looking at, is if you go through that list, as you just said, Mr. Chairman, general professional offices, manufacturing plants, research, none of them say indoors or outdoors, but do any of those things occur outdoors?
So if we.
Then these regulations come down. We make a distinction, indoor, outdoor, outdoor, outdoor.
If we approve this, there's many, many of these regulations that we're going to turn a blind eye towards, because this is an exceptional request. This is a temporary request. They have a formal SCP, they have a final SCP for what they're gonna do to this property. So it's, we could go through the list, I had 15 of them the last meeting, 15 different things that they should be doing to this property, which they're not going to do. So if we're going to approve it, we're gonna have to put all those things aside and say, this is unusual, it's temporary, it's going to only last 6 months. If they just wanted to go and put those trucks in there now and have, stay as residential, they could do that and drive those trucks in and out all day.
Right, if it
So-
stayed a residential property, we would have,
Right.
it would not
Yeah.
come before this commission, but they want to change it from a residential to an industrial, and they need a change of use, and what they're asking for requires a special exception, and special
And the
exception
reason for
permits.
that is so they can get the loan.
That's that doesn't pertain, they're asking us for a change of use on a piece of property. We have to look at the land use, just the land use, all right? And our regulations are clear. For a change of use, for what they're proposing, they need a special exception permit. And
Which
our
we can
regulations are very clear in what the procedures are for a special
But
exception.
when someone
permit.
comes in here for a change of use, is it mandated that there's a project to go along with it?
I don't know what that means, Paul. The whole
An
purpose
SCP?
of a change of use is you're going from one use to another. Each use has different requirements. And when you take a property that is for residential purposes and convert it to commercial purposes, they're very different animals.
No, I understand that. I'm talking about with any proposed project, meaning, physical changes to the improvements to the project, to the building, to the site.
If the property warrants it under the regulations, if someone comes with a change of use where the support facility complies with the regulations, such for instance, you have an approved parking lot building, heating system, septic system, and the change of use doesn't have any operational or functional differences than what was there already.
No, like,
you
what
can
if it's a
rationalize.
raw piece of land with nothing, it's just a raw
Okay,
piece of
say-
land if somebody comes in with a change of use?
Let's say this didn't have a house on it.
Yeah, no, it had
Let's
nothing.
say it was just a meadow where they cut the grass.
Right.
Are
Someone
you,
can come
are
in
you-
for a
are
change of
you-
use.
Are you gonna approve parking vehicles on that?
Well, no, I'm asking if we could approve a change of use without improvements to the property.
The change of use isn't just saying it's a house and now it's industrial. That is not what you're doing. You're approving something that meets the tenets of the law and the regulations that meet that use, the needs of that use.
Well, normally, we use a change of use to improve properties and bring them up to standards, up to code, okay? In this case, we're not gonna be able to do that. We'll have to take the longer view that next year, they're going to bring this property up to code. by the next SCP that they bring forward to us.
Right, but right now,
But right now, they're not.
right now, we're evaluating an SEP that they have presented to us. You know, and I don't wanna confuse the change of use. Yeah, we can just say, all right, you're not residential anymore, now you're commercial, but in order to
Well, we've already done that
affect, in
We
order
did
to
that by the
affect
zone.
by
that,
the zone, right?
well, yeah, but in order to affect that, there needs to be an SEP. And forget the change of use, status, or anything for that, like that. Their application is for a special exception permit for construction material storage and vehicles. And that's what they're applying for. They're applying for permission to do that. And our regulations are clear. If you look at chapter 8, there's step by step what the responsibilities of this commission are when you're evaluating a special exception permit application.
We're allowed to disregard those regulations to an
We are
extent.
not allowed to really just totally disregard our regulations. And if we do, we open ourselves to court case.
Right.
And we would lose. Because these are the zoning laws of the town of Monroe. And we don't have the authority to say, we're not gonna follow the laws. The only way we can do that as a commission is to change.
Well, we can
these.
interpret the regulations, though. And in interpreting these regulations, we're looking at a long-range goal for this parcel. If we say no to this, that parcel's gonna sit there the way it is now, for who knows how long. At least we're looking at a plan.
Until their next application gets approved.
But I also don't understand
But
how.
they're not gonna be able to
who would-
move forward.
How would somebody argue with nothing being done on the property? What are they, what? Nothing's being done on the property.
Because,
Somebody's gonna come and argue that?
because we're giving them permission to do outside storage of construction material and vehicles. We're giving them permission.
And that's all.
We're approving, yeah, and they're saying, oh, we're not gonna do that. But you know what?
Well, they are gonna put the trucks there.
But once we give them approval, they can bring in whatever they want.
Well,
Then
no,
what?
they can't
Then
bring,
it's in-
if we limit it to 4 pickup trucks, can't we limit it to 4 pickup trucks?
Okay.
And technically,
Well, let me ask you a
till
different.
January 1st.
Till
Let me ask you a
January.
different
Even,
question.
even besides that, because we
Contingent
could
on
say
otherwise.
that, you know,
So-
this, they may never do the other project.
I get that. And this is food for thought. Again, you guys will have to make your decisions on how to operate. You may condition it to 4 vehicles, right? Because that's what they offered it down to, okay? So you're just gonna have to find that the existing driveway with the existing siding or some 1 tree or 2 cut, that is adequate for an industrial use with outdoor storage. Someone's gonna come in with 1,000 pickup trucks. How are you gonna differentiate and say that that is not acceptable?
Someone's gonna come in with more than 4?
Yeah.
We're restricting it, restricting it.
You mean in a different
No.
property?
What is your rationale, no, on
No,
this property,
Same property, gotcha.
under the same conditions? What is your rationale that 4 vehicles are acceptable, but 1,000 pickup trucks are not?
Yeah, but we.
Because we make individual
We're
decisions.
making
based
this-
on
it's
individual-
for this-
Yeah, I'm with you.
It's
Give
for
me,
this
give me,
specific-
give me the
Well,
finding.
the size of the property, the non-conforming existing, the location of the driveway, there's plenty of reasons.
Okay,
why
same
we're
property,
restricting.
same condition. You approve a restriction of 4 vehicles on it, and next month, somebody, he sells it, someone comes in and says, okay, I want 1,000 pickup trucks.
Then you don't
No,
approve
they
it.
want to.
What is the reason?
I just gave you the reasons.
They can't
I told you,
support
there's a
that.
lot of issues.
How does it
Can't
not support it? How does it not
Because
support
of,
it?
because of the.
They're not arguing that it's
So,
vehicles.
property
these
and
4
equipment
pickups, these 4 pickups can go in and out that driveway safely, but 1,000 of the same vehicle can't.
It's not just the driveway, it's also you know,
Any
it's
other-
it's not paved
All right,
properly,
well,
the
let's say,
size of
let's
the property.
let's bring
a
it,
lot
let's
of
bring it
different
into a
reasons.
more
Yeah.
realistic thing. Someone wants to come in and put 50 vehicles on that lot. It's a big lot.
He
They wanna-
wanted
they
to
wanna
put
put-
more on there,
they
and we
wanna
told
put-
him no.
They want to
Well,
put 50.
Originally, his
The
application
bottom line
was
is that
for large trucks.
we're proving something, my logic is that we're proving something that has essentially no impact on what's there now. If you're all of a sudden allowing 50 trucks, that's a difference than what's there now. You know, if somebody were to go and park 4 trucks there, nobody would even notice, right? That's my logic.
I mean,
He just needs a
If you park
formal
50,
approval to do what.
then it could be an issue.
You can't just look at it that way that, yes, if that was a residential property with 4 residents who had pickup trucks living there, I agree. And the impact is no different. What's different is we have regulations that this commission is supposed to follow. And if we're approving a special exception permit to allow a commercial use on a piece of property, we have guidelines, not guidelines, we have regulations that we as a commission are supposed to be following. Yes, there's some latitude in certain things, but to just say you can file an SEP application and do nothing, I think is ludicrous.
So if we're letting them park the trucks, the 4 trucks, we're agreeing that the storage is outdoor storage, is allowed to be outdoor storage, correct? That's
Yes, that would be,
as the principal.
that would be what you would be saying.
Do we have a regulation on, so what if it wasn't trucks? What if they were doing bricks? Can they fill the whole property line with bricks for storage, or is there
You're
a?
saying, what you would be saying
Hmm.
is that any, again, what was that use I said? Right here, storage of building materials or construction equipment. They just happen to be saying 4 trucks.
Yeah,
You're saying that any building material, any construction equipment of any quantity would be allowed under this.
that's what I
use.
wanted to know. So it is any quantity. So again, if it was bricks, there's no yardage requirement or anything. They could come
Just
in
what the-
there and they could
Whatever you
put
determine
bricks.
the property to bear through environmental reasons, physical reasons.
Setbacks.
Setbacks.
You
So,
can have restrictions.
so then that would be, to answer your question, 1,000 trucks versus 4 trucks, is you're within that environmental impact, the setback impact and stuff, would be the argument, to answer your question.
I'm not
before.
sure I understand what you're saying.
Well, you said, why would you allow 4 trucks versus 50 trucks? It would be, those would be the reasons, the environmental impact, the same reason why you wouldn't allow bricks to.
I get that, but what is the environmental impact of 4 trucks going out that driveway versus 1,000 or 50 of the same truck going out that driveway?
Well, yeah, it's not what's going out the driveway, because it's being stored, it's what's being stored on the property, right?
But they're using the driveway, they're using a residential driveway, not a commercial driveway, because you're not bringing it up to a commercial standard. So you're saying it's acceptable as it's configured,
Mm-hmm.
and it accommodates those 4 pickup trucks. And my question was, whether, if it's 4, I'm not changing the truck.
Yeah,
Now, if you change it to a semi, I get it, you can start arguing,
Yeah.
that's a whole different
or
animal.
4 trucks versus
But
50
4
trucks.
trucks versus 20, 10, 50,
Okay, so
how
you're,
is it different?
so it's exclusively to the driveway though, right? Because then my question back at you is, what's different than storing 4 bricks on the property and 1,000 bricks? Is it just them moving in and out of the property that we're talking about, or is it what's being stored on the property? Because they're not arguing, and he said it, he's not calling them vehicles, they're pickup trucks, but he's putting it, and it doesn't, he's exclusively calling it, if, in the application, construction equipment. That's what they're calling the trucks. So if we're looking at it as the construction equipment, that would be the 4 trucks versus 50 trucks, or 1,000 trucks, to
They're all,
answer that.
they're all gonna be the equipment.
Yeah, and so again, it's whether it's being stored or whether it's moving on and off the property. Is-
Well, it has to come in and out at one time, it's not,
Well,
it has to go in
Yeah.
to get there.
yeah, so then,
And
so
someday
do,
it
so
may
do the
not.
bricks, so
And-
we talk about that with bricks, that's what I'm,
No, my point about the bricks is that it really had nothing to do with the quantity in that respect. It had to do with what you're going to say that use is. The first question of business, forgetting whether it's 4 trucks or 1,000 trucks or
Mhm.
bricks or not bricks, is that the question is that use a principal use inside a building? Or is that an
Right.
outside, that's your first question.
yeah, and I mean, if we're storing the truck, if it's 4 trucks being parked there, it's outside. So the question is, does this count inside or outside? The lawyer said it's indoor storage, but we can interpret that, that's fine, and then that's not an argument.
And
later.
the question and then I bounced from that,
Mhm.
was getting into the other materials. What that means is then, if you determine that this can be outdoors,
Mhm.
that allows every bit of building materials of any kind to all be outdoors.
To be stored outdoors.
Yep.
Okay.
So you wouldn't even need a building for anything.
There's still limitations, right? I mean, you can't.
The
You
limitation.
can't put them
i-
up to the property line.
That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
where I'm going back
You know,
at.
heights, you can't stack it up 200 feet.
Okay,
There's still
again,
limitations, right?
But
Well, there's limitations to the property limits,
Yeah.
yes.
But it doesn't state that there, that it has to be indoor.
No,
At
it
all.
doesn't.
So,
And it doesn't
We can
state,
interpret
it also
it.
doesn't state that
So wait,
general offices are indoors or outdoors. It doesn't state manufacturing
know.
This
is
is
indoors or
one of the
outdoors.
issues
It
that
says
we
Dwelling
asked.
activities are indoors or outdoors.
The land use attorney, our land use attorney, for clarification on. As I said before, his interpretation of our regulation is that items that specifically state outdoor are outdoor. Items that do not state anything are indoor.
Do we have to accept his interpretation?
No, we don't, but.
If something doesn't say one or the other, then it could be interpreted as being either one.
And
I would interpret it that way, actually.
everyone is entitled to their own
Yeah, well, that's-
interpretation. We asked for a legal interpretation from the attorney that
If
represents us.
something is not clear, then it's
yeah,
open
but
to
did
be
he see
either
that
one.
this was a separate thing in our regulation? Did
Yeah.
he see that?
So then what you were saying, if you make that interpretation, that basically is a construction yard. Which
We've already
you have
had this
historically
problem.
said,
We've already had this before.
which you've historically said, you do not permit.
We knew that we had to look at this a little bit further.
We currently have other sites where we're telling people they need to remove construction equipment that's just lying out there, correct? Is that
Excuse
not-
me?
We currently have other sites that we've told people they need to
No,
remove.
we had one application come in where they applied for outdoor storage as a principal permitted use in the I-2 zone,
Mhm.
and we
This use
granted
right
that
here.
application.
Which allows the
Yeah.
outside stuff.
But that is in the I-2 zone, and that is the principal use. There's no building.
But it says here.
Yeah, which is what we would be agreeing to with this, with the porch.
So this is an I-1 that we're talking about.
Gotcha, but in and on, yeah.
I'm sorry, is that the
It states
principal
in the
use?
I-1 that we could
That's a
allow.
principal
No,
use
the
in the
other
I,
one.
in the I-2.
This
Yeah.
is not permitted in the I-1 district.
Is the I
Well,
one?
we got, but, and.
Could you scroll up a little?
This is, they could
Are those
apply,
principal uses?
they could apply for this use, but that's not the use they applied for. But this would not allow them to store the 4 pickup trucks unless those 4 pickup trucks were used on the premises, because this only allows vehicles used on the premises.
You can't have parking
Yeah, but we
of
do.
vehicles?
You cannot, you can have your vehicle of your personal use, your business use that you come and go with. You can't leave it there.
Do we
You
know
can
what these
leave
trucks are
only the
used for?
vehicles which are used on premises. We went through
Yeah,
this
but
with
you, I
124
understand that,
Enterprise.
but
What-
you could say
what is
that,
this?
that.
I am sorry, I can't hear you.
Do we know what these pickup trucks are used for? What does this come
It's a
to?
paving
It's
contract.
paving.
Yeah, tools and stuff.
So technically, he could say he's working on paving the driveway the whole time with the trucks?
Yeah, but he's not gonna change his application now.
No, it's too late.
Yeah.
They just didn't do it.
I guess what it comes down to is which way do you want to go with this?
Well, that's what we're trying to determine.
Right, well, then we need to make some kind of consensus going down the thing here, which way we're gonna go. And then we'll have to work it toward that, right? I mean, basically, I mean, we're gonna sit here and argue about it all night.
We're not arguing, we're
We're
deliberating.
deliberating, I mean, but, well, I'm
There's a
saying,
difference.
Wrong terminology.
well, deliberating about it all night, so.
Well, remember, you two are not in deliberation. Ryan, what is your general feeling towards
I
this
mean,
application?
I think, as most of us, like, we definitely want business coming into town. We'd love to approve something to allow them to continue and then bring something back, but, you know, there's a lot we gotta look at, and it's whether or not, you know, allowing this is gonna bring other,
Do you think this application, and this is simplifying the question,
Yeah.
do you think this application should be approved or not? Based on its current status?
the
And
applicant.
there's not gonna be any change in status because we closed
Yeah,
the hearing.
no, yeah, and I mean, I just don't.
We can approve it
think-
with conditions.
With without a doubt, if we were to approve it, I would want a condition that our lawyer reviews and gives us an actual approval of the sunset.
we can't do
We can't
that.
do that?
The hearing's closed.
Okay,
No
so it
review.
can't even be like the sunset thing being
No.
approved?
No,
We
can't
can
do that.
apply conditions.
Right, we can
With- with
apply
the
conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we
Without
can't,
the
but we
lawyers.
can't ask for outside input.
Right.
Gotcha.
once the hearing is closed.
Yeah, I mean, from what we've gone over, I don't think it could be approved.
Leon? This is not a committal, this is, what's your general feeling right now?
Start down with Mike then.
No.
I think we should approve it with the conditions. I'd like to.
I agree.
And I think that, you know, that we should try to make it work. And I think we should try to make it work. I think, you know, I mean, I understand where they're coming from and I understand what
No,
they
no,
want to do.
just,
I
let's
got
try
it.
to simplify this, so then we
Okay.
can move on
All
in
right,
which
move
direction
on
we're
then.
going.
Okay.
I am not in favor of approving this as it currently stands. It just does not in any way, shape, or form meet the requirements of our regulations. That's all there is to it.
You're right, it doesn't, but we don't have an intermediate approval process here. It's something that
You're
would
right.
work for them. We don't have something in the book that works for,
Well-
with them.
I'm all for working with applicants.
Right.
You know, and I tried
Right.
working with them in ways that I thought could get this thing more in line with something that we could approve,
Uh-huh.
and they were not interested. As this application currently stands, would they want to use the property and do nothing other than maybe put some screening up, but no paving, no driveway improvements, other than cutting down a couple of trees, I don't think even comes close to meeting any of the requirements of our regulations.
So,
But again, my logic is, what is the risk in approving this as is? You're saying someone could, you know, come and argue?
The
Argue
risk,
what?
the risk is,
Precedent is-
Argue that you're not doing anything.
how do you tell the next applicant that comes in and,
But we don't have to
and
do-
gives you an application and says,
Back with it later.
well, I want to do this, but I don't want to do any work on the site. I just want to be able to use the site. And what's your rationale going to be for turning him down? How are you
They
gonna
wanna
tell-
change the use, they wanna change the use of the
Doesn't
property?
matter, doesn't forget, change the use. This piece of property is approved for
Well, that's what this
industrial
is, that's what this
uses.
is about, this is a change of use.
It's a special exception permit application.
For a change.
The change of use comes about by the granting of an SEP for an industrial use. So if you're going to allow an applicant, if you're going to approve an application with the applicant doing nothing to meet any of the terms of our requirements and our regulations, how are you gonna tell a subsequent applicant that they have to meet the regulations when you've let other applicants, well, let's say, well, you let that guy go and use that property and he didn't have to do any work, why do I have to do work on my property?
Well, honestly, if somebody came in with
We're
the same
supposed to be-
situation,
we
I
are
would tell them the
supposed-
same thing.
We are supposed to be enforcing these regulations evenly across the board.
Well, typically, when you require certain improvements to the property, it's based on a project coming in and it needs to follow certain requirements. You're gonna have a parking lot, well, it needs to be X, Y, Z. You're putting a building up, it needs to be. If somebody comes in and does nothing, how can you restrict nothing?
They're not gonna do nothing. They're gonna
park four
park four
vehicles.
vehicles and store construction material.
That's, I'm
Paul,
saying
if they're gonna-
physically doing nothing.
But Paul, if they're gonna physically do nothing, why do you need to give them a permit? What would be the purpose of getting a permit for nothing? To do nothing?
It's an interim step so they can go on.
I get that, that's not that point.
That's
that
why
he's
we're
making.
doing it. I
Yeah,
mean, that's
that's
why.
the reason- that's the rationale
I
you
don't
wanna
believe
get to,
you
is I
can't
get.
store, outdoor materials now there, can you?
No, it's a residential.
Right, well, that's the reason why you're giving it.
Well, could we argue that they're improving the property by, one, making the sightline better? Because cars are coming in there.
They're not
in
making
there.
the sightline better. They're cutting down a couple of trees.
No,
Well, the
I would
other
say
thing
that there
is,
is no improvement.
well, and then what
That's-
if, you
There
know,
is no improvement, zero.
well, what if the changing it to an industrial use is the improvement? Would that technically be improving the property?
Technically,
It's in the zone.
we can't just say, all right, poof, we changed your use. There has to be an application filed,
Mhm.
a use
They did, it's
application.
not
An
great,
SEP
yeah.
has to be filed, and by this commission approving a special exception permit for one of those approved uses, it changes the status of the property.
It changes the status, but why does it, but it doesn't mandate that you put up a building and parking lot and
No, but it mandates that you
comply.
comply with the regulations in obtaining an
Right.
SEP.
Right, comply, but how do you make a building comply if you're not putting up a building? How do you make a parking lot comply if you're not putting parking? How do you make anything comply?
Read section 8 of our regulations. That tells you how.
Well, tell me how you make a building comply that's not there.
It's not the building,
Well,
it's
it's
the
everything.
use.
The drainage,
Everything.
the driveway, everything. Something that's not there, how do you make it comply?
Well, but why are you saying it's not there? You're parking vehicles have to be parked on something. When you do that, your regulation is actually required to be paved. Once you pave it, now you have stormwater. How do you deal with the stormwater? Where's the stormwater going? Is it being treated? Whether it's 4 vehicles or 4,000 vehicles, you have those requirements. So how do you rationalize that? How would I draft that? That's what I'm looking for. I need the finding of how that meets those tenets.
There is no pavement on that property?
The pavement is,
It's probably millings or something.
yeah, it's millings and there may be some patches of pavement. It's nothing that's cohesive and of similar grade or of continuous space. I mean, in and out and organic.
But on the other thing, is there any way that we can make this work?
Yes, by
That's what I'm
approving it.
saying.
With
But I'm saying
restrictions.
is like, but I'm like,
It's,
is
to me,
there-
it's common
does-
sense. You
did
allow,
you get
allowing to
anything
park
on-
4
on-
trucks there, I don't see what
they
the
only
problem
want, they
is.
only want this for 6 months. So it goes away in 6 months, no matter what, right, Will? Or you're saying it stays with the property, or is the
The
sunset provision?
SEP actually goes with the property. There is no expiration on SEP. There only is an expiration on the site plan component
Right,
of the SEP. So in
Well,
essence,
this could go away.
the issue with the sunset is that the state statutes don't provide for you to, in my opinion, to put an expiration on an SEP. There is no expiration. It runs with the line.
But they put it on. We're not putting it on.
Well, that is
Yeah, they
a
are.
potential
They
legal
offered.
question, but you're granting an SEP.
But let's assume that it doesn't go away. Whatever we approve is permanent. Again, what's the harm of parking 4 pickup trucks there?
Yeah, it's,
And
That's what
storing
it's
construction.
common
Well,
sense, right.
It goes with the land, so if
Yeah,
in a month they say this isn't gonna
So-
work, he doesn't get the loan, they sell the land, the next people that come in,
there can only
Can-
park 4 pickup trucks there.
no, they can use it for outdoor storage. It's different people.
No,
It's approved for storage, they can come and
Okay,
store other
well,
stuff.
Can we
again,
limit- can we
I get
limit
back
it
to
for-
my question. You're conditioning it to 4 vehicles for what's the rationale that it's limited to 4 vehicles?
The rationale is that there's no site improvements being made. It's an existing condition.
So 4 vehicles is fine with no site improvements, but when does it become site improvements important, needed?
When you're looking to do something,
So 6 vehicles? 8, 12?
Well, they originally wanted to have 12 of 16.
No, I just want to be,
And then we said, no, but 4 will be okay.
no, I understand that, but, and I get the rationale for why you're thinking that way,
Right.
but I'm looking for the rationale for making the findings so that when someone
Okay.
else comes in and wants to
Well,
do
the lot
6,
would you agree,
supports
would you
4
agree that if you have
vehicles.
4 vehicles that back up, turn around, pull out, pull in and out, it's disturbing the parking area, right? Now, if you have 20 doing that, it's disturbing it even more, right? So, isn't that justification enough
And what is
to
your...
minimize disturbance on the
Well,
site?
can't we
What is
do,
your, hold on, what is your justification, based on our regulations, for approving this SEP? You know, when we approve any application, we give reasons for the approval, stating how it complies with our POCD and our regulations. So tell me how you would write an approval for this SEP application.
Well, it's consistent with the POCD.
It doesn't have, it's not having any negative impacts on property, the neighbors, the environment, everything, you name it, because you're not doing anything.
How does it comply with our regulations?
Is it existing condition, comply?
No, it's not an existing condition, because it's a commercial
The
use.
physical condition.
Doesn't matter, it's a commercial use, it's a new use.
You're asking me, that's what I'm telling you.
How does
That's
that
how it
comply?
complies, because you're not doing anything to it. It's an existing condition.
I mean, we'd like to see it improve, that's the whole idea when change of use comes before us. That's our chance, really, to get them to fix this up.
It's our
get it
chance to bring
compliant.
properties
Bring them up
into
to
compliance.
Exactly.
And they're saying,
We're gonna do it next
In January.
6 months, but we can't do it unless you give us this grace period here. I mean, there are no regulations for grace periods.
No, and I'm not even going there. I'm assuming that their project will never happen.
Well, I'm assuming it's going.
No, you can't, because it could never happen, right?
No.
I mean,
It could.
So I'm assuming it never happens, and that's gonna be the limit of parking 4 trucks there. And I suppose, can we limit the amount of materials that are stored on site?
Yeah, they don't even really care about actual materials, they just want the 4 vehicles.
Then tell them we limit it to, I don't know, cubic yard.
You can put limits and conditions, but they have to be relative to what the regulations allow you to do. They'd be based on the regulation.
So, is there any
So
way we
what's
can
the
do that?
again,
Can we do that? Is there something?
Well, you can condition anything any way you want, but again, you're subject to scrutiny.
Of course.
Okay, well, let's assume it is indoor storage. With indoor storage, I assume there's some nominal material you can put outdoors?
20%.
You know,
They're not
somebody,
asking for indoor
somebody had,
The problem is they didn't ask for
doesn't-
indoor. That's the
No,
problem.
even if they do, again, you have to, let's look at this, you deal with this regulation. All non-residential and multifamily residential off-street parking, all non-residential, that's industrial, it's commercial, any kind of non-residential. Off-street parking and loading facilities, outdoor storage, driveways and site access roadways shall be paved with bituminous concrete. The driveway's dirt.
There's many regulations we're gonna have to ignore. There are many.
No,
There's no signage, there's no stormwater drainage, there's just a list of things that we're gonna have to ignore.
but how do you justify, in an approval letter, how do you justify
Ignoring those.
How do you justify an approval based on your regulations for an application when they're not doing any of it? How do you
That's how-
justify the approval?
that's how you justify it. It's an existing condition.
No. No.
I would only justify it by saying that it's consistent with the POCD. It upholds property values. It's good for the community as a whole. The other bigger picture
No
that we're
impact
supposed to be
on
doing
You can't talk
Here.
X,
about
Y,
that.
Z.
versus,
You can't base your analysis or your approval on something that might happen in the future. Just the same as you can't restrict somebody because you speculatively think something could go wrong. For instance, you couldn't give them a condition, something because you think if they build the catch basin, it's gonna fail. You can't do it based on speculation.
Could we approve it with the condition that they pave it?
You could.
they won't.
Do they have to?
They don't have to implement.
They don't have to pave it. They could come and ask for an extension until January 1st,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You can approve it with 100 different.
That's right.
But that's not gonna make it any better, not based on what
It's gonna get them what they
Well, no,
want.
you're saying.
If we approved it with conditions, bringing it up to our standards for an approval.
But it's gonna have to be all or nothing.
And then we're gonna tell them they're not
We're not
doing
gonna have them
it.
do
They're gonna
half of
come
it,
for an
right?
extension of
Oh, just put
time.
some paving, then it's okay.
Pave the driveway and the
And then
storage.
January,
Any
we-
storage areas or driveways to be paved.
Would you agree with
And then
that?
that's in full compliance then?
It's not in full compliance.
So
It's
that's
one
my point.
component.
That's my point. So either you have to have them do everything, or, or nothing.
I mean, if we tell them they have to, and we grant it, how long do they have to bring it to compliance normally? We give them 100
Well, they would
days,
have a
90
time
days.
period that you get final plans, but then they have a 5-year window
Yeah.
to build it out.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, what,
And
if,
another 5 years on top of that.
but I mean, that gets them to their January date where they're coming with this other thing. If that's really what I mean, we all agree, more or less, that we would love to see the site improved. If giving them this and then having them go a month or two non-compliant and us sending them these letters telling them, hey, you need a time extension, them having to come in for a time extension, where then at the point they might come with a whole new application for the actual project that they're working on, would that work?
Can you write up an approval that brings them up to our standards?
You can write whatever you want.
Right, can we do that?
Yeah. I mean,
We don't even have a plan for that, so how?
So you're gonna design the project for
We,
that?
we don't wanna design a project. We're not-
Well, that's what
Not
you're supposed to do
specifically,
in the
but-
processing.
They're supposed to do it.
No, you're supposed to evaluate that and get the
No,
information.
I know, because they're supposed to come here with the
And if they
project.
don't give you what you need,
So
If they
that,
don't give you what you need,
by putting
you don't
conditions
approve
on
the
it, it's
application,
not
is
gonna,
what it boils
that's
down
not
to.
gonna work. It's really not, because we don't have a plan, we don't have a driveway plan.
I would not be opposed to an approval with conditions that brought it up to meet our regulatory standards.
I would go with that too.
can we regulate, the size of a driveway on a property? Is that something, do we have a square footage on a driveway, or can a whole property be completely paved?
you can't completely pave it because there's other requirements that would keep you out of certain areas, like landscape, the
Yeah.
front landscape buffer doesn't allow it to be all paved.
Okay.
But substantially, you could have a project that's all building and all pavement within the confines of the setbacks and the buffers and all that. But you will have to have all the support structures to go with it, so if you have a 10,000 square foot building, you need X parking
Yeah,
spaces.
so if we were to approve it with the pavement focused on, you're gonna, approve it to pave where, because the vehicles you store need to be on pavement, that will limit, they're not gonna pave the whole property, if they're just doing 4 vehicles, you're gonna get 4
Well,
paved
anything they
spots.
store needs to be on pavement.
Yeah,
Can you put the conditions in a general sense, say, must comply with SCP standard?
We have to
Is that
tell
too
them
general?
what to do.
You get a line item by line.
Oh, well,
We have to
There-
tell them more or less what to do so it's clear. You can't be doing what the application is supposed to.
Right, but that seems like, again, we're
they have
doing
they're
their
going,
job.
I mean, I understand it doesn't have anything to do with this, okay, but they already have a pending application in wetlands, right? Am I
Yeah.
not, or not,
Yeah,
right?
Doesn't
yeah.
matter,
So they already have a plan.
doesn't matter.
So if we put conditions on this, what happens with that plan that they come in with? They gotta get rid of this and
They're
then
not
go on.
planning, they're not gonna do anything with this application, other than try to secure a wall.
The other will be a change of use. If you approve this, the other will be a change of use from that use to that new use. And that has its own requirements, similar ones,
Let's
but
stop,
other
let's
ones.
stop using the change of use, because it's gonna be a special exception.
Everything's a change.
Right.
You know, everything is a change of use.
What is that?
Every
use? What's the new
SUP that
use that
comes
they're
in.
proposing?
A manufacturing.
Manufacturing?
I suggest this so we can try to get this thing moving forward. If you would like to see some conditions,
yeah, because I feel like if we do the conditions, it gives us, I'm still questioning this whole sunset period. And if we put conditions on it, we do have the power to grant time extensions. And if we, as a consent, we don't kind of as a group know that the time condition's gonna be then, and then this isn't gonna they don't build the driveway by January 1st, then they're in violation. We can do that.
Leon, what do you think?
I think that we should work right to get the next 6 months. That's the way I look at it.
Doing what?
Give them some kind of approval for,
With conditions?
I don't know what kind of conditions you actually could put on there. Well,
Paving?
Yes.
okay, then, let's deal with the paving. But does that cover all your issues? No.
No.
That's my
Doesn't
point.
cover it.
So why
So why would you do it?
why pick pavement?
I said that was a start, that was
It's a
one.
start.
Yeah, because you're doing something. You want it approved, don't you?
Yeah, fine, but I'm just saying, how do you justify that? You know?
If they're gonna park
That's
cars,
one-
it
That's
needs to
one
be paved.
condition, Paul, that's,
So
there's
we
gonna be a list of
of
conditions.
conditions.
So that's just, so you're gonna create
I'm
a
gonna,
list?
I'm gonna ask Will to create a list
I
that
think
will,
I think that's unrealistic. That's fine.
That's working within the rules.
Yeah, I think that's,
Based on-
I think that's.
That's
It gets
not
them- it gets them what they
ignoring-
want.
It's not ignoring all the.
If Will is really,
regulations.
is willing to do the work of the applicant,
Well, he already has it in his
No, I'm not gonna,
comments.
first of all, it has nothing to do with me willing, I do what you asked me to do. Second of all, I'm not doing the work of the applicant, that's for you to decide what's appropriate in front of what you have. I will draft whatever you want me to draft to meet your decision.
Could, I will. Is there a way of us doing this?
Yeah, we can draft it with all.
I
the
understand it, but I'm
conditions.
saying, do we have a path to do that? With minimal stuff.
I'm not sure what you're asking me, other than you all have to decide based on the record what you want, and if you wanna condition it with X, Y, Z, you need to tell me what X, Y, and Z basically is, and I'll put the close on it.
All right, so with that regulation that we had up there in the I-1, it says, doesn't say anything about inside or outside storage. Right? We're just assuming that it would be inside. Or we're saying that it's, I'm saying.
You need to make, you
But
don't
I'm
need to ask
saying
me
to you,
anymore,
no,
don't
I'm not
ask me.
asking you that question, I'm just saying to you, it doesn't specifically say
Right, so you,
inside.
you as a commission need to decide, does that allow it to be outdoors only? Does that allow it to be indoors only? Does it allow a mix? You all have to decide that.
I'm
And
not a
then you-
lawyer, but if it doesn't say indoor or outdoor, then it could be whatever you want. I don't think you have to be a lawyer.
And that's,
to determine
that's,
that.
you can interpret it that way, and you're gonna have to live with that the next time someone comes in.
Absolutely.
So then we
And
have to-
that argument,
So-
again, I wanna just caution you, is that you can make that same point with all of these.
I got that, because we've already had that situation already once. In another zone, no?
Yes,
No, you're saying
So-
that you're gonna allow manufacturing outdoors.
absolutely,
You're gonna allow assembly of electrical appliances outdoors,
that's right,
right?
based on what you're interpreting.
Yeah,
Which is
but
fine,
I
so you can do
understand
that.
still have
saying-
to, still have to prove it.
Prove what?
Approve
We have to-
whatever it is, whatever.
We don't have to follow precedents.
Look, I'm not making a pitch to do either or, I'm giving you the,
I got you.
what could happen
Right.
with
No.
that
I
determination.
understand, because it's already happened.
no, Michael, I don't agree with you. If we make a certain type ruling on one application and then make an opposing ruling on a subsequent application, there's grounds for an appeal on that. Big grounds on it, because you let this guy do it, now you're telling me I can't.
I know, but let's be realistic. Somebody's not gonna come in and wanna assemble, electrical components outdoors.
No, but somebody is gonna wanna do outdoor storage without improving the lot. Everybody would like to do that.
But we're going to provide limitations of how
What
much
kind of
outdoor storage.
limitations?
Whatever we want, right? We can limit the amount of storage.
Well, that's the first I'm hearing you say that.
No, I said it earlier. I said we allow, it could be a yard
All right, so what do you
Material.
propose the limitation of the outdoor storage to be?
1 yard of material,
And 4 pickup trucks.
and 4 pickup trucks, and that's it.
And then we have to put the conditions of the pavement, the striping, the signage, the storm drainage, what else? That's,
Sightline,
what?
sightline.
Sightline improvements.
Oh, the trees, cutting some trees.
Yeah, sightline.
And let me ask you, if they cut the tree for the sightline, you're okay with the stump being there? I wanna be clear so that we know what we're approving.
What else? Would be the condition.
As long as it's
Well, you
not,
didn't answer that question.
I wouldn't, but that's
My-
that's
my
what bothers
recommend-
me. It seems now like we're doing it,
my recommendation would be,
half-assed, and that's why I
the stump-
disagree with this.
What about the
if
stump?
the stump should be removed if it's in the line of sight. The sight line should be, there's an 18-inch clearance for sight line off the roadway. So if it's within that 18 inches, then it should be removed.
No, that's fine, I just wanted to be clear
Well,
what the end
you're
result
talking
would
about
look
setting
like.
precedents, right? So that's why I'm against what we're saying here now, because now you're gonna allow stumps to remain. So now if somebody comes in and, has a landscaping area, you're gonna allow stumps,
But you're okay with allowing an
No, I'm allowing nothing.
SEP to be approved and do nothing? You're okay with, but you don't wanna leave a stump?
I think he's saying either
The
we go
stump is
all
there
the
already.
way
I'm-
or
I'm
we
saying
don't
it's
do
okay.
anything. We either go all the way or we
I'm saying
don't
if
do
the
anything.
stump is there, then you're okay with it. If you're telling them to cut the tree and leave the stump, that's different.
Okay, you guys ready? All right, so if you go to approve it, here's your conditions that I'm suggesting, at least from a technical perspective. That you'd approve it with the following conditions. Number one, widen the driveway to a minimum of 24 feet. Two, provide increased radii on the driveway to provide unencumbered access for SU 30 without encroachment into opposing lanes in the road. Three, provide stop bar and stop sign. Four, provide sightline improvements as offered, including stump removal to provide a minimum of 18-inch clearance. Provide stormwater retention to 1-inch runoff, to contain 1 inch of runoff off all impervious areas. Provide paved parking and driveway areas, pavement and parking and driveway areas. Provide required handicap parking spaces. Post site stabilization and restoration bond of $5,000. Indicate specific limits of outside storage and small trucks and 1 cubic yard of material. Indicate existing and proposed grading to achieve a minimum 1% and maximum of 5% pitch. Include site stabilization and restoration bond with anti-tracking restoration plan with anti-tracking pad. Provide details of retention system, drainage calcs verifying compliance with the above standards, catch basin detail, pavement cross-section detail, and line striping detail, and indicate proposed landscaping for site screening and show fencing along property frontage as proposed. That's what I got. Anybody want to add anything?
No.
So if we were to prove it with those conditions, do they get the permit and then have to work towards the commission, or those conditions, or do they not get the permit until those conditions are done?
What they do is they have how many days to meet the conditions of their approval as an ROA. They revise a plan, they provide the drainage calculations, and we sign off on the plan, they get their permit. Then it sits in the, on the bookshelf, waiting for them to post a bond, to file the approval on the land records, and to have their pre-construction meeting. They have 5 years to do that. Meanwhile, they can go and get their funding because they have their permit. They don't have to build anything, and then they're coming in, they're already applied for their second application, and they're coming in with a site plan to develop the property.
And now a second application, does that eliminate the other one, the original one, or?
After it's approved and they implement it, yeah.
Yeah.
So
But if the subsequent application gets filed, gets withdrawn or whatever, the first one still is an approved application
Yeah.
for 5 years.
Yeah, so then they have 5 years of doing that.
seems to me that meets their what
Scott-
they need to do, right?
Well, I don't know about all that, because I'm gonna ask you one question. Does that get them, does it,
Well, they're gonna have a stamped plan that says.
They're not gonna approve of that.
Well, they could require, it does, nothing to say you can't submit it, you can't file it on the land records, especially if the approval says shall take place until the bond is posted and the pre-construction meeting is held.
And that would be counter to every 100% every other approval we issue.
Well, we used to do it
Yeah, we haven't done it for 4 years that way.
that way. Just trying
But
to.
no, they can do.
So what he's saying is, that's 3/4 of the way there. It gives them their approval. but it doesn't allow them to file the approval letter on the land records.
And if the bank wants that,
Which most likely they will, right?
which
Well,
we don't know.
We don't know, we
don't
can't
know.
think about that, but.
but if the bank wants that, then they can go forward and post the bond, which is no big deal, and have the pre-construction meeting.
They have to finalize the plan.
Right, they're
To
gonna,
do that.
They're gonna have
exactly.
it
That,
drafted.
And they don't have enough time to do that.
therein lies.
And
They don't have
that-
enough time to
That's
do it.
not an issue.
No, they will, right?
That's not an, well, I
And
don't-
there lies the
I
rub.
don't see
Yeah.
why they can't do that in that period of time.
They have like a week.
1 inch of runoff, drainage calcs for 1 inch of runoff off from pervious areas are required for house construction. I get it within 2 hours from people. When I call them up and I
We're
tell
not,
them, you
we're
have
not
to do
looking
this to
for a
get.
very large impervious area.
No, I mean, the drainage calcs are easy. The plans, I'm sorry, but they can be done in a day. 2 days, they can be done. I'm an engineer, we have an office, and if we have to do something, we have to do it and we get it done. That's not a hard plan to do. I mean, you're not asking for a real lot there. They don't have to design anything. Sightline is probably the most difficult thing. They have to go out in the field, and they have to take a couple shots, and they do have to get some information for that. As far as putting the rest of these things on here, the details, it's already done. They just take a sheet, they put a sheet number on it, put a title on it.
I don't disagree with it. Doesn't take
And
forever.
I don't see where that's our concern.
No, it isn't, but it's not gonna take a week.
Well, I'm just trying to help.
No, I agree with you. I know.
You know, at least we're working with them.
I am in agreement with what Scott put together. You good? You good?
Yeah, I think so.
Paul?
Better than nothing, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you want a silo or?
Yeah.
Let's proceed along
Wrong
along that line. All right?
Yeah.
We need to take at least a 3-minute break.
Okay.
We going home?
No. I need 3 minutes, trust me. 9:44. We go. That's right, Ryan.
It's better to be closer in.
We good?
We're good.
Okay, we're back, 9:50 PM. Anything else we have to deliberate on?
No.
Okay, item number 14, regulation review amendment work session. We had a brief meeting before this meeting tonight. We're still working on revisions to the big text amendment that we're working on for definitions and parking and all of that. Hopefully we'll get through that in one more meeting, and then we'll present the revised draft to the commission. Item 15, correspondence ever received, there's nothing. Commission reports, was it last week that that seminar was on plan reading?
I think so. It was, May 21st?
It was,
Yeah.
the second part of that Connecticut land use program. And they had a program on basic plan reading. And it was, I don't know what you guys thought about it. Jonathan and Ryan were there. I thought it was pretty decent. They went over site plans and basic stuff.
You need to freshen up.
I picked up a few pointers, but it was a good program. I mean, for somebody, it was an elementary level, but for, a lot of people that have never even seen a site plan before, it was quite beneficial. So I encourage you, if those programs come up in the future, whatever the subject matter may be, they're worthwhile. They go from 6 to 7:30, they start at 6, they finish at 7:30, and you get free pizza. Any other members have anything to report? All right.
You guys drive the roundabout?
Yeah, I came up that way tonight.
Stinks.
Land use staff. I think the roundabout's a good thing.
I do too, actually.
It'll
On the
be,
record, I
it'll
think
be
it
good
is.
when they.
People need to learn how to use it,
Yeah,
but
it's a mess right now.
it'll be good.
Okay. Land use step, you should have, received in your packets, I think tonight,
A copy of
Yes.
special proposal.
So obviously, you haven't been able to read this, so let me focus you. The POCD is from December 2010. There is a statutory requirement that it be updated periodically, a minimum of every 10 years. So obviously, by December 2020, we would need another adoption of some upgrade or update of the POCD. That can be a simple statement, everything's fine, as is, or you can relook at stuff. Obviously, there's a lot of base data in the POCD that needs to be updated because it's 10 years old, you know, so you'd want to understand that and look at how those changes have affected the town. The other thing you would look at in the POCD update is what in the past one did you accomplish, what didn't you accomplish, what you didn't accomplish, is it still relevant, and, you know, those are the things you kind of look for the future. It also looks, the POCD goes beyond just all the things that you all do. It's really a comprehensive look of the town in general. So it does get into school district aspects, it gets into open space beyond just the regulation part of it, but the whole management of open space, town facilities. And so as part of although the Planning and Zoning Commission does it, you would reach out in that process to the different facets of the community and the town to get the vision of the entire community built into the POCD. The first step in this process is to have the hiring of a consultant. Typically, the town has hired a consultant to assist in this. You don't have to, that's up to you. You could do it all yourself, you could do it with staff, you could, you know, do it with a part-time consultant, whatever. That's sort of up for the town to decide. But historically, you've hired a consultant to assist in doing the process, because part of the process isn't just the drafting and the data crunching. There's also a public participation component. And, you know, from my perspective, I don't have a staff, so it's hard for me to plan all that stuff plus do everything else. So having a consultant that does that more on a consistent basis, you know, is better than me trying to reinvent the wheel. So that's an important component. This could take anywhere from 1 to 2 years. It all depends on the complexity of the issues that you all as a town are going to put to it. So the RFP I drafted for the purpose of soliciting proposals. The way that it's envisioned is that we're giving some direction as to what we want to see in the POCD, but we're recognizing that you haven't defined all that, and part of the job will be to define some of that. So it's finding the right consultant for the town, and then the first step with that consultant is going to be somewhat defining the relative scope of the POCD from which a budget gets created from there. So they'll give you an idea in their proposal as a budget, and then you refine that after you select somebody. So, and then you would negotiate.
So their
a
scope
price.
of work is not clear?
No, there'd be a clear scope of work, but there may be specifics about the scope, because it's not, you know, it's not like designing, like you're used to, you got a site, you're designing a building, you know a lot of the tenants. The consultants are gonna know what it takes to do a comprehensive plan based on what you're asking, but, you know, when you get into some of the specifics, some of those additional studies, depending on how depth you wanna get into that study, could have a difference in cost and a different direction. So there'd be some opportunity when you pick a consultant that's in the realm of the right cost and the right experience and the right understanding that you're comfortable with, that you're gonna be able to negotiate, you know, up and down a little bit within, you know, I'm not talking going from 50,000 to 100,000 or 50,000 to 10,000. I mean, you're just refining it so it's more specific. On page 2 at the beginning, I tried to identify the base understanding. So updating the existing data is the first bullet. So
So there's a series of data, demographic information, how much land is in the different districts. That has changed over 10 years. We've rezoned properties. The demographics has changed. The environment to some extent has changed. So that's the first step. The community engagement, that's undefined. I mean, you have to, we could go through and scope that, but we could also have a consultant come in with ideas. And he's gonna say, well, it's gonna cost you X dollars, and I'm including these things for public engagement. Someone might come in and have a same number, but have half as much of this, and that's how you evaluate the difference between those consultants. And then, when you pick the guy, you refine that scope, and then you find the real cost. The next bullet is really the one that's gonna be the most open, and this is where I want you to focus, so we can have a further discussion, this is where I'm trying to have you all figure out a focus of what you wanna do with this version of the POCD. So if there are specific things that you see lacking in the previous POCD and in your experience on the commission, that we need improvement, and we need to evaluate something, this is the time to do that. And, for example, in the original the last POCD, it talked about this priority growth in village districts and identified 3 or 4 areas in town where that could occur. And it said to do a more specific study. That was the recommendation in the POCD. That hasn't been done. We didn't do those. So it's possible that, building on that, we can do some specific analysis of, for instance, let's take the Stephanie, Route 5925 area, and try to think we're gonna create a little village district or some kind of thing.
Wasn't somebody already focusing on that?
They did not, I don't know if someone is outside of us. The last POCD simply identified that location as a potential area for it, but did no analysis specifically of how that would get done, how broad, how big, how far out you're gonna take that. So we can do that.
We had someone come before us like a year ago in a general appointment, asking about mixed use and, the potential for mixed use. You might not have been on the commission then.
No, but I thought there was some group that was already looking into,
They were putting one
Specifics of
together,
it.
but they never got it.
never got it, never got it.
I mean, there is a Save Our Stephanie Green
Yeah, no.
group, but that's not the same thing as creating this whole village concept or district concept. Another example, we have the Stevenson lumber property. We've had a few people come in and, have ideas about that. The POCD could take it a little further and do a little analysis to figure out what might be appropriate, which could help the EDC market it, working in the marketing and figuring out and attracting people for what it is. And maybe we can change the zoning. The recommendations could come out with changes in the zoning relative to that, so a little focused study of that area as another growth area for businesses in the future. Because right now, all it really says is B2. That's all it really says. That's all the plan said. So again, I suggest that you focus there and come with some ideas if you have them and other things that you would want to see the POCD focus on. So the more that we can put that in here, the better you're going to get a response from a consultant.
Having been involved with the 2010 POCD, I can tell you emphatically, we need a consultant. This is not something that we as a commission want to take on as individuals, or something that, this is beyond, right now, the capabilities of the department with the manpower that we have. This is really a pretty intensive project.
Who did it last time?
BFJ.
Yeah.
And prior to that was, I think, Planometrics.
Planometrics, yeah.
That was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that Will is taking the time to put this together because, we have a year and a half to get this done, but it's time now because by the time we as a commission review this, refine this, get this out for bids, talk to prospective consultants, get somebody on board, it's gonna be 2019. And it's a year-long project to get this done, to do it thoroughly. So, I think the last one we did, we published it, I think, in October. I think it was October
June, December.
2010, wasn't it?
Well, it was, final adoption was December 14, 2010.
Yeah, so, you know, we started that in 2009, I think. So it takes, a good year to do it.
Yeah.
How was the public participation in the last one?
It was pretty
A lot of
good.
people, let's put a lot of people there.
I'd say there was probably, I think there were at least 4 public workshops,
Yeah.
and I bet there were probably at least 50 people at each one.
Wow, okay.
And, a lot of the, people were there consistent, so it was like, it worked on the previous meeting, and it grew.
But although you hire a consultant, they can just dump something on you, or you can be actively engaged and get every inch out of it and get what you want. Because in the end, they're gonna go away. And it's your document, so you want it to do what you want it to do, so you need to,
And it's, we talk a lot in our meetings about POCD, but I don't know if anybody has really ever taken the time to read it. If you haven't, you should, because it's supposed to be what guides the decision of this commission. It's like the master plan for the town. So it's a pretty important document, and, the one that we're gonna be putting together is taking the town through the next 10 years. So we gotta take it seriously.
Were you here for the last one?
no, I was not.
It was Rick Zinni was the chair, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I remember going to some of the meetings and being involved in it, in the Conservation Commission.
All right, anything else?
So again, I'm gonna put this on the agenda again next time, so if you all can focus in on this thing, and again, my main focus is those substance sections of the POCD. Please come with your ideas, your thoughts, and hopefully we can move this along to the next level.
Is the current POCD online? Does anyone-
It is online, and if you do not have a paper copy, we are in the process of getting several printed, for those who don't have one, and also in anticipation of the revision, other people are gonna want it, so.
Oh, yeah, I have one.
So we should have, if you contact Laura, let her know, she'll make one available to them when we receive it from the printer. But it is online.
Anything else?
That's all I have.
All right. Motion to adjourn?
So made.
Okay, 10:05.